Okay, listeners, viewers, welcome back to episode 34 of the On Patrol podcast. And if that is wrong, it is Windhurst's fault. Paul can vouch for me. That's what he told me before we came on air. So, yeah, that's on Windhurst. But no, we're super excited for this episode. We're gonna talk with Paul, Pitt History Guy. You'll learn a lot more about that as we get through the episode. And what we're diving in today is to get those juices flowing for the 250th anniversary of the great, nation, the United States of America. However, in true On Patrol fashion, we're going to talk about something that happened 251 years ago, because we're always a little late and behind, even though the 250 is coming up. We're going to be talking with Pitt History Guy today about Lexington and Concord, the battle of that. And if you think, well, weren't those skirmishes, or didn't that happen, or weren't those two separate engagements? And in true American style, right, we put Lexington with Concord, so we couldn't say that the first one was a defeat where we ran away from a bridge, right? No, but we're going to talk with Pitt History Guy about playing those battles on a table that is 32 feet long. Now, now pick your jaw up off the floor and get ready to dig into this episode. We're going to hear a lot about the battle, the research, how you get people at the table, how you make it fun, playable, everything in between as we come up. And we're also going to talk a little bit at the end of the episode about getting people into gaming and how Pitt History Guy does that in spades. So without further ado, grab your sword, your shield, your spear, your belt-fed machine gun, your musket, and your militia flag, and get ready to join us on this episode of On Patrol. I'll take it over to Windhurst for alibis, caveats, and piggybacks.
Yep. So as always, if it's your first time listening, before we get into the meat and potatoes, we like to make sure we cover anything from last episode that we might have missed, or if any feedback we had. So last episode was Age of Hannibal, and that was our first time really reviewing a rule set, not in the standard kind of 28 mil. That was still infantry. I know we did airplanes once. I got a little bit of feedback. People appreciated that we were branching off into a different scale. That is something we're going to continue to try to do. We did airplanes, and now we did 6 mil. So we will try and branch out from things, not just focus all the time on 28, even though 28 is our normal go-to scale. So you can't expect to see some more of that. So if that's your bread and butter, if that gets your heart pitter-patter, as Kentucky used to say a lot, then you should see some more of that. That's all I had. Kentucky, did you have anything else for Alibis Pants?
No, there was a lot of people that talked about the terrain cards and how Age of Hannibal does that. It's something that I think that rule set is just head and shoulders above on, rather than agreeing with your opponent how the map's going to be laid out, that game within the game where you're setting terrain down in a blind with cards, and that's you and your commander, or you're kind of picking your side, and then you can extend that. So it was a really fantastic way. I do think I'll play a little bit more of that rule set. Me and Windhurst have kind of lied out, what good benefits it are, and hopefully one day we're going to get one of the campaigns, whether it be the Punic War or the Pyrrhic Wars, rocking between the two of us. Really appreciated everybody's thoughts on that, except for Jeff from Ashland. You said we were Candyman because we gave every rule set, which is not true. That's not true. We've been very critical of some rule sets in the past. And then the only thing I'll mention on alibis, caveats, and piggybacks is we said out last time, like, hey, people, keep posting your hobby progress and everything, and we're going to say that at the end of this episode. But, man, I've just seen a flurry of people painting up a storm and doing all that, and it's continuing to motivate me, so I just have to plug it here, too. That is, guys, continue to do that. It motivates me, unless they're DB paints. He paints too well. I wish he would not post as many pictures. Normally, if somebody's outside my league, it infuriates me. No, I'm kidding. He does a great job, and he's awesome. But, that'll wrap us up for alibis, caveats, and piggybacks. So the first sergeant or the commander has stopped talking for 15 minutes there, and we'll go into the intro of this episode. So, Pitt History Guy, we genuinely appreciate you being here and taking the time to talk to us today. You have a rich history in the wargames hobby, and we're impressed with your latest work, especially, I say again, everybody, especially a large 32-foot table. I've seen the pictures. We'll try to post them on the group chat as well for Lexington and Concord, in this historical fight that pits the freedom-loving, or our English listeners, ungrateful colonials against the might of the British Empire, or maybe just the people that weren't the firstborn sons, right, and had to go fight on the fringes in April of 1775. So we're pointing at a battle that is maybe not in line with the 250th in some sense, but I think it is, right? This is the shot heard around the world. This is the thing that gets us started, even though we're in 2026. It's truly magnificent, and just as I said, Pitt History Guy, we'll try to post the pictures and share some of the amazing stuff you've been doing with that type of game and gaming in that period. We're excited to discuss your process and hoping to ignite and excite others to recreate historical fights. We've already done one of these, me at Windhurst, when we talked to people in near Huntington and Ashland that did Point Pleasant. This stuff is just really exciting to us. Is like, how does somebody think about this fight and then do the research, the analysis on it, get it to the tabletop. And my intro conversations with Pitt History Guy, the key of this, the whole crux of this problem is make it fun. How do you make it playable? And so I'm really looking forward to hearing that today. So your table, your miniatures, your attention to detail, and your hobby acumen was on full display during the battle posts. However, let's continue to pull on that thread before we get to that topic and discover a little bit more about you. So I always tell people that are guests on this show, this is us. We're on patrol. This is us either taking a break or we're getting ready to move out, and we're getting to know everybody in the squad or the little militia that we'll say we have together here as we go out to Breeds Hill, or we get ready to go out of our little small Massachusetts town or New Englander town and fight the British. We want to know more about Pitt History Guy. So I'll kick it to Windhurst to kind of kick off the first question to be asked to you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Windhurst.
Thanks, Kent, again. Yes, so as he said, the first 9 or so questions, we're just going to get to know Paul and who he is. Just introduce him, because he seems like a great guy, and we want you guys to get to know him. And then we'll kind of get into meat and potatoes about the battle. So the first question, Paul, we always like to ask is, when did you start in the hobby? Kind of tell us what that looks like.
So I'm another fighting Kentuckian. I was born half an hour outside of Lexington, and
a city slicker. Slicker. No, I'm kidding.
The big city of Stanford.
Yeah.
They make fabric paint. If any of you guys do, and one of the things you'll see in this whole interview is low budget. How can you have fun for not a lot of money? And I don't mean a lot. I mean really not a lot of money. And so Deco Art paints that you get for the little dollar bottles, they are made in Stanford. It's the only thing that my birthplace does. So, with that plug, being born in the little fabric paint town of Stanford, and my dad was a Baptist minister there, he decided at the age of, when I was 3 years old, they were putting out a call for chaplains during the Vietnam War. And so my dad decides to go from little rural Stanford to join the Navy. And so we moved from there to Norfolk, Virginia Beach. Biggest military concentration in the world during the Cold War outside of Vladivostok. So I'm told that Vladivostok had a bigger, because that was all they had in the Pacific. But of course, now that Russia's fallen apart, it is the biggest. But so here I am, a preschooler surrounded by aircraft carriers in Norfolk and fighter planes at Langley Air Force Base and landing craft and Navy SEALs and Army. There's, whether it's the transportation at Fort Eustis or Fort Story and just everything, Coast Guard, it's all there. And something about me just really got into the gear side of it, and I just was fascinated with, even in first grade, drawing everything. And then within an hour is Yorktown, and within about an hour, 15, 20 is Petersburg. And so then there's the battles that get me interested. So like a lot of little kids, I'm playing with toy soldiers and building wooden forts when I'm 4 and 5 years old. And then that quickly goes to show my age. In the mid-70s, little boxes of Airfix soldiers cost 49 cents.
It's crazy.
And granted, inflation over 50 years, but still
cheap.
And so I'm one of those people who stuck with my 1/72 all these 50 years, because the affordability is what I want to show it. And everyone else I love 28s, they're beautiful. And so I went from big toy soldiers, Revolutionary, World War II, whatever, everything, to 1/72 Airfix. And then from 1/72 Airfix, then one of my dear, sadly departed friends, I'm an only child, the guy that acted like my big brother, he babysat me, but he really was. He took me fishing. He was much more than a babysitter. And he introduced me to the American Heritage game series with Broadside and Dogfight and all the little 1960s games. And then the related game Feudal. And so that was my first sort of game official, and then went from that to junior high school in the late 70s, Africa Corps and Waterloo in the Avalon Hill series. And of course, to show what a geek I am, my first miniature rule sets was Tractics. And I don't know if you know Tractics, but Tractics has all these tables, and the armor penetration tables in Tractics were based on the Aberdeen Proving Grounds armor penetration tests.
I have never played this rule set, but I've heard about it in the sense of like the most complicated, where you had charts and tables that you had to go to, and you had the speed and velocity of this round. And so it's in my mind, it's like the gold standard of the crunchiest rule set in existence.
And it's got morale, but the real big thing is armor. And like exactly, like it's all geometry. Like you're at the Panther has, I'm making has 60 millimeters of armor, but it's at 70 degrees. But you're also 30 degrees off of it. So what's the effective? And you've got to do it. So what's the real to penetrate? And so it's the worst game for building the hobby.
I'm going to create a research problem for myself here, because I know the guy in Ukraine that destroyed the T-90 with the Bradley, like the chain gun was like, he shot at the turret ring, and he was like, I learned that from the video game I played. And in my mind, I want to see if like somebody defeated some superior tank, I guess in maybe a third world country, off of that game. It was like, I played Tractics, and this is how I knew how to do it. It would be crazy, but no, keep going.
So anyway, so I went from there, and then once I'd gotten to board gaming and into miniature gaming, it was off to the races. And of course, one of the weird things about our hobby is that some of us are broad, and some of us are like, I only play 15 millimeter Napoleonics on the with Austrians, or I only play and with their, I only play this board game at with this period. And it's like, and anyway, so I'm broad. I'll play anything. I have a dear ASL group that I'm newer, but they've been doing this for 31 years now. They met as grad students at Pitt and Carnegie Mellon, and they're still going at it. And even the people who moved away are still, anyways.
That's awesome.
But anyway, so
that's your foray into the hobby. And so I think to some degree, me and Windhurst have talked about this, like, Airfix and HO scale and like my dad's old Marx figures and stuff, like 54 millimeter. That's how I got into the hobby. And then I didn't take the modeling route so much. It was that, and then you pick them, rubber band guns, all of that. And then Windhurst has talked about like coming from the 40K side, into the historical hobby, finding this, and just his passion aligns with that. With people now, I find them, they have different routes, but I would say you have like the credentials of that period, right? Everybody comes up with Marx and Airfix, and then it's Avalon Hill, and then you go on from there and you get into the hobby. The thing that I like about yours is I would stay, you're staying loyal to your roots a little bit with 172nd to some degree, but it's awesome how it's been so affordable. And man, I just remember those little boxes being so cheap. And I'd love it if, for some reason, there was a resurgence of that, or if somehow kids picked up history a little bit more.
You still see 170 scale plastic box sets for really cheap. I just don't think it's promoted in local stores anymore. Like, it sounds like from everybody we talked to from who came up in probably your generation of wargaming, you could go anywhere and find model kits like that, the Airfix stuff, at all sorts of stores. I mean, the guys in the UK we've talked to, they said you go to like the local gas station or grocery store even, and they'd be there, and you just don't see them available anymore like that.
And you speak Ukraine. Oh, sorry, go ahead, fighting.
No, I'm going to say I want to put a pin in this, because I want Pitt History Guy to tell us at the end of this episode, when we ask him about expanding the hobby, he's got a way that's even cheaper than that to bring this hobby to you.
Free.
And we're going to talk about that. And so I want any listener or viewer to be like, free? What? And I want you to be thinking about, okay, stay involved in this episode. You're going to hear all of the Pitt History Guy's secrets and his TTPs on how he expands this hobby, how he does awesome games for very cheap, which he just said, free. So besides maybe some Stafford paint. Who knows?
Just one thing.
Go ahead.
One thing I want to ride on Windhurst's comment about Ukraine. So one thing that's been amazing, I'm a big fan of Ukraine and Slava Ukraini. We've actually had a flag hanging on our house since the initial Donbass invasion in 2014. My wife and I actually went down to the first. Sorry, we're getting a little bit political here. We went down to the first protests asking for Ukraine support at Lafayette Park next to the White House. And
it's a horrible time for. Just right now in the conflict, right. And we've got listeners. We get to see our listeners all over the world.
Demographic,
and we've got some in some of those countries that you're talking about that are affected. We have listeners in Ukraine, so our hearts go out to you. War is an awful conflict. Although we like to wargame it, I think there's a lot from history we can learn. I'll let you go ahead, history.
Oh, but what I'm bringing this back to is that I just got back from Kentucky, and waiting for me was a package because I don't just believe go Ukraine. You got to put your money where your mouth is. And so I've made friends on the internet, and we talk about it separately, but today I had waiting for me a package of 2 1/72nd kits, plastic soldier kits, that are made by nobody else in the world. And throughout this war, Ukrainian 1/72nd airplanes and tanks and model soldiers at good quality are made by a number of different Ukrainian manufacturers. And so when I actually order them from the Ukrainian manufacturers via a Ukrainian hobby shop called hobby.dn.ua. And I ordered it, and I got it in less than 2 weeks.
I have noticed, I know it's a little off topic, but because I did all of my modern wargaming in 20 mil, I have noticed looking at the plastic stuff that there are several companies based out of Ukraine that they're the only ones still making 1/72nd scale stuff. So it is, I know we talked to, it'd be nice if that would make a resurgence in that scale, but it is still there. It is still being supported. It's just not, I think, as prolific as it used to be.
But thanks.
No.
Sorry, you just mentioned Ukraine.
No. Excellent. I bought. I'll be honest. I put my money where my mouth is. I have the piece of you could buy like shrapnel of T90s, ruined T90s, and so I got a bunch for my office when all that kicked off. But anyways, moving on. If we haven't lost any of our listeners yet, we're gonna try to before the end of this episode. And somebody's like, I want to see somebody skip through this and be like, they're talking about Lexington and Concord. That it's Pitt History Guy and me and and Ukraine. So what the deal is about Ukraine?
The Ukrainians that fought at Lexington.
Yeah. So moving on to question 2. That's about how far we've gotten into this thing. What was the game or first thing that brought you into the hobby? I think you've said that.
Yeah,
so what?
Yeah.
In order to not kill that, what we want to move is to number 3 is kind of who was the most influential person in the hobby. And normally we have Sherpas, whether it be a hobby club or group. I consider my family was very instrumental in Sherping me through the hobby, taking me to Cold Wars, to Historicon. Windhurst has a father that's into history, but he also has he's been involved in some amazing hobby clubs, to especially include England. But what's your who's the most influential person, you think?
Certainly my parents did, and my favorite story about and your army. So the Virginia National Guard armor is at Fort Pickett.
Yep.
And so my dad never pulled rank except for once, and he wore his 06 chaplain uniform and drove me, the only child, up to Camp Pickett when it was Camp Pickett, and went up to, and they weren't doing anything. It wasn't one of their active drill weekends. And he was like, my son really likes tanks. Could you show him around? And they were like, they see the 4 bars, and they're like, yes, sir. And they took me around on a 113 and an M42 Duster, and I got to...
No, that's awesome.
Just showed up. But anyways, but the man was Dr. Douglas Crowder, who was my functional older brother, who started me in the American Heritage and the feudal. He was the man. So
that's awesome. It's always apologize. Sorry for your loss. But this is a social community, and it's awesome to hear those stories. And they're going on right now at some table across the globe, and they're yelling at each other. They're in their fighting phase right now, but it's great to have those people. And connecting in this hobby is just amazing. But I'll kick it back to Windhurst for the next question.
I think that's always a good one to ask people who was the influential person, because I want our listeners to know that they could be that person for somebody else, even if they don't know it. Keep promoting and encouraging people, because one day they might look back and it's like, you're the one who really made their journey into this hobby possible. And so the next question, as Kentucky also likes to say, is like picking a favorite child. And that's why we say several, usually in parentheses or brackets, but what is your favorite wargaming rule set? And you can have a couple honorable mentions.
So we're going to talk about what I used for Lexington and Concord, which is the most universal one I use. And my lead youth gamer, when he started a wargame group in his high school in the Pittsburgh area, he also used these. So that's showing that it's not just me, and it's always gone very well. I don't know, again, if you've ever heard of Bruce McFarlane, and he did a whole bunch in Western Canada, and it's not the best, not the most accurate, but, and we've talked about this, Kentuckian, in a hobby where even on the inexpensive things, you buy your $20, $40, $50 set of rules, you buy your 8 or 12 Osprey books, then you get, forget the miniatures and the terrain, just the rules and the research. And this is so, and it can show up anyways. Literally, in this book, this is the 1812 book he did. This is 90s, and this is old beat up. You can see I've had it since the 90s, but you can buy these online for $15. This has for $15. You get the tactical rules. You get an annotated version of that to make it skirmish rules to play instead of 1 to 50 guys to play 1 to 15, 1 to 20. You've got this one has even a naval rule set for simple playing Lake Erie stuff, and then there are scenarios. This one, both on land and water. There's even a painting guide, and it shows you, it gives you all the colors for all the British and Canadian and American, because War 1812, Americans are wearing blue and brown and whatever.
Yeah, whatever they can find.
And of course, all the facings for all the British, all in one book. And it doesn't. And even if it doesn't get that, it starts you, and everything else you can find for free at the library.
Well, that's what Pitt History Guy said. Is like it's it's like $15. I bought a copy as well. I bought a hard copy as well that I found online. And then I just let the audience and listener know, like, this is probably a rule set we're going to review, because I have heard a lot of people, if you go into this period of history on any of the blog groups or anything, people will play this rule set pretty prolifically, and it's something that Pitt History Guy is bringing people to the tabletop with it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about, there's fun. There's this fun aspect that we kind of lose sometimes when we want to go through 160 pages of rules. And to some people in the hobby, I know that's fun. I know Tractics is your jam. You want to know the geometry of that 90 millimeter gun at the the left wheelhouse of the T-34 you're lining up, and that is what makes it for you. I get it. I would just have to think you're in the minority. Like, I have to think if you're bringing people to the table. Yeah, man, Pitt History Guy's like, I'm the Tractics guy. What are you talking about? No, but I really look forward to it. What would be, Pitt History Guy, what would be some of your honorable mentions that you've really enjoyed over the years, and especially with the length and breadth that you've been wargaming?
Yeah. Oh, and one, sorry. So the rules come in the 1812 and the French Indian War books. They actually don't even bother putting it in the Revolutionary War book. They say, go see the other books. But it comes with 2 board games on top of everything else. So it's like, it's stupid how much stuff there is.
The best value.
We've actually run Charge the Light Brigade. Because and it worked well.
That's
so
pretty awesome.
It's crazy how, anyways, and one set of rules. Because, people, especially non-professional gourmets, these are just people who play once a month, twice. You don't want to, you certainly don't want to do the same thing over and over and bore people. But you don't want to be people whiplash who are coming occasionally and having to spend all the time learning even a simple set of rules. People want to. They don't come to learn rules. They come to make friends. They come to roll dice. They come to shoot, to blow up their friends.
Exactly, exactly. What would be, but what
anyway,
would be
so-
those honorable mentions over the years?
So the honorable mentions have to be, again, for the museum, it's anything I teach in 15 or 20 minutes. So command and colors and everything similar to that. So, of course, being World War II and Civil War, the big ones, Battle Cry, and hopefully, dude republishes. He's finally got the rights back for Battle Cry and Richard Borg, not Richard Berg. Which is still a running joke in my marriage. But Richard Borg's Command and Color set, especially Battle Cry and Memoir 44, are just the gateway drugs, even simpler than pure miniatures games.
Yeah.
But any kind of miniatures, tactile things,
Yeah.
as much as I love my Hex Encounter, physical, tactile things, even if they're not painted, just attract newbies.
Well, I think they bring the ground to life in my mind. Whereas me and Windhurst have talked about this even with Age of Hannibal, is like there's reasons why I consider us probably, we've played chip-based games, don't get me wrong, I like them, but Windhurst, I'd say you probably agree, like we're miniatures. We love to see the armies on the table, the lines, the ground, even if it's a clump of foliage or some of the most expensive or beautiful trees you have at the terrain shop. It's like, oh, that creates this like break in realism for you to be like, oh, I'm here, I'm this commander. And then you look down at your New Balance shoes and you're like, no, I'm not. It's 2025. But no,
But So Civil War for naval, Dawn of Iron, really good. Again,
Okay.
Wargame Vault is. I have no problem drinking bourbon in moderation. I cannot buy PDFs in moderation from Wargame Vault.
That's a good answer. That's a good answer. Well, this is a good follow-up to that then, too. Windhurst asking you about your rule set. You have to pick the baby. What's your favorite? I think I know right now, and with you being a stone's throw away from the Monongahela, what's your favorite period to game? What's your favorite period?
Actually, I hate to say it's. If you see my hat,
Yep, Civil War.
I actually volunteered for the national parks at Antietam.
Okay.
So I've done that for 6 years now, and it is absolutely, and it's an hour 10 from Gettysburg. Gettysburg gets all the attention. The old thing is people will come and say, I've set out 3 days for Gettysburg and I got a spare hour. What can you tell me about Antietam? But it's just a wonderful place. And so I would say that Civil War is my favorite. French and Indian locally is and I didn't do any of it when I grew up in Virginia. That was all that. But once you go to
AWR,
Pittsburgh,
yeah.
it's just like New England. I'm sure if you grew up in Boston, it's going to be and all the revolutionary stuff. But French and Indian we've got 5 museums within an hour of Pittsburgh, and they're all great. And in fact, and we run a game day even though we run our main game day every month at Soldiers and Sailors, which is the 1910 Grand Army of the Republic meeting hall. And we play under 7 original Medals of Honor, which is great
awesome.
because we're playing and it's silly and we're going bang, bang, you're dead. But especially as the child of a late chaplain, having those Medals of Honor and then stories of other Medals of Valor surrounding you remind you that real people physically suffered, emotionally suffered, and it gives you some.
Oh yeah, we've done an
Sobriety.
episode. We've done an episode on this because I do think it's especially with wargaming is those 2 words together, right? And you split them apart, and it's like, hey, this is war, this is a game, and I think it gives you some reverence for the situation of what you're playing. But I think with most wargamers, they're diving into it just like you said about the history. I find it interesting. I would say a vast majority of wargamers are like us. I think me and Windhurst have this. Nuance for the Civil War and French and Indian War with the area and region we've grown up, just as you were talking. But you always find one who's like, I love Crimea, and they're like from Western Tennessee, and you're like, what? How did this? Did you read a lot of Rudyard Kipling when you were coming up? Like, what happened here? But so
It makes me think. I was talking at my league game today. When I was in England the first time, the most popular period for mainland Europe was American Civil War.
Yeah.
And it just blew my mind that anyone outside the U.S. would care about wargaming that conflict. But then again, people play Crimea or English Civil War here, and it's like we had no involvement in that either.
They have a roundtable. They have a roundtable, Civil War roundtable in England.
Yeah,
wild.
but I am curious. We did an episode on it, so just very briefly, because I know you're very public in the public space running games and everything. Have you ever dealt with any controversy or kickback doing Civil War games? Because we've done an episode on that, and some people are like, we've never experienced wargame being controversial, but Kentucky and I both have experienced it. So have you ever experienced anything?
So
you don't have to be
the
specific.
controversy that I've really run into at the museum is not for Civil War, and talk about like getting kits into kids' hands we talked about earlier. So I buy 40-year-old plastic kits from friends at a real cheap price, much cheaper than you can get them, because a friend of mine buys them in bulk, and that's his retirement job. So, and I give them away to youth, and then I've shrunk a 6-class section on how to put together plastic models into one page, and I can teach it in 30-45 minutes. And so the one thing I run into there is I'll have junior high school kids say that my parent won't let me, I can't have the swastika, which is fine.
Right.
And so you've got to, it's on the decal sheet. So we throw that away, which is completely understandable. But we do have, we are trained for that as National Park volunteers to deal with people of all sides. And of course, we're completely apolitical, and as we're representing the national parks. And I certainly have gotten,
conversations, from
yes, and not against me, but just personal concerns from multiple sides of the political spectrum, and you make people feel better about it. I will say, at the museum, we have not had any, and the way that I think, I'll pat myself on the back. I think the way that I communicate it, and I start off for every new person. We talk about that, and we talk about the fact that my dad was a chaplain, and we talk about and the respect for all sides, and it's not I'm very I've never had a problem for it, and not that it wouldn't, but yeah.
Well, I think Windhurst brings up a good point, especially with something like we just expect you would have seen it a lot more than us based on your repetition, and you're bringing people in. Like normally we're at a game store talking games, or we're trying to get people into it, and maybe a lot of our converts are, from historicals are coming from 40K, right? In 40K they can say, it's made up, it's fantasy. Don't forget all those skulls that are on top of each other. And then you're like, hey, we're playing World War II over here, and then they're like, they see the SS on the table, or they see a German unit, or they see, hey, we're playing the Battle of the Wilderness, and that's a rebel battle flag. They're traitors. What are we doing here? And so there's this part of telling history, which I think you have to do and respect it. And in a sense, I think it tells our story, right? And especially from the historian perspective, it's like we're not whitewashing anything. Like this is what happened. And so I think that brings some credence to it. I'd say the problem you've never dealt with is you've got like these two other guys that don't have the length and breadth that you do in the hobby, or the historical background for the stuff that you've done in Antietam. So it's like, okay, they know this guy's coming of a a good place, but hey, that fighting Kentuckian's hair looks a little cut too short. What's that guy doing over there playing World War II Germans? So I get the feeling, and I hope you never run into those phrases. And everything I've heard about it is you're extending the hobby and just helping people understand history more, which is awesome.
And listening to your question, it makes me think that you probably are going to get more, because so I run, in addition to running the game at the museum, and we cover, I've gotten to the point that we cover a different period every month. So we have a theme. You can certainly run any historical games, but I try to run it so we're not always playing Gettysburg and Omaha Beach.
Yeah.
And we'll run through, we'll have an air war month, and we'll have a naval month, and we'll have a World War I month, and whatever. May is going to be actually Minor Wars May, so it gives you an opportunity for not talking about the greatest hits. So Korean War and Spanish American, blah, blah, blah. But to the point, people are coming into a military museum, and I also do this, run a Civil War, I run Battle Cry almost every month at a library just outside of Pittsburgh that has a Civil War speaker, and we run just a simple Battle Cry game for 2 hours before that, but these are self-selected people, so whereas you're going to get people who you're sort of catching off. I think
that's what I was curious.
Easier.
There's a game of BattleTech, and then there's a game of like, World War II Germans versus Soviets on this table. What? I didn't expect to see that. So I take it back to Windhurst.
Yeah. So moving on swiftly. So this one, the way we like to ask it is, what's your favorite model or unit in your collection? So specifically not historically, like from history, but the model or the unit that you're just either the proudest of painting, or if you have a chance, you're going to try and work it into a game because you just love them.
No question. M18 Hellcat.
Really nice.
The Buick 55-mile-an-hour Wonder. and the coolest thing about it is that, and it was underappreciated in World War II, is that you think a tank, well, a tank destroyer that was built to be an offensive weapon to shoot and scoot, but its biggest victory was at Bastogne.
I was just about to ask that. Yeah.
And they still did the shoot and scoot, but the fact that they were able to use, and they lost very few Hellcats, even though and without the Hellcats, the armor would have run right over the 101st. Bravery notwithstanding.
There were 3 towns right outside of Foy, to the northeast of Foy, and I just read about the groups that they were putting together to kind of keep the Germans back. And when they were encircling the 101st Airborne, I was able to go over there and do the battlefield staff ride with the division, and I was like, I got to go to these task force sites. And when I was reading about them, just like you said, the Hellcats doing that and keeping these Germans at bay on all these hills surrounding them. But it's doing it between like 2 or 3 buildings. And it is just like, it was amazing. And it just even makes it, when I put it and I was there on the ground, I was like, okay, this farmhouse is here, this farmhouse is here, and they're being bombarded, they're being pried out of the, and the Hellcat with its soft cover roof is just...
No, or nothing.
Yeah.
In the snow.
It's got canvas over the roof there. It's just it's waylaying some Panzer IVs or whatever it could get to. So awesome. You'll have to send us a picture of the model you have so we can post it up here. The next one is another one we like. Again, trying to catch up time here so we can talk about Lexington and Concord. And people are watching this or viewing it are like, Bastogne, Ukraine? What are we doing here? So what is the best war game you've ever played? Not just the rule set. So we talk about this, and I think about my time with HMGS and going to the cons and the staying up and playing the Fire and Fury at midnight. There was like a Midnight Madness Fire and Fury game. Playing anything... by Richard Hasenhauer. There's so many. Just any. I'm trying to think of the big games that are out in the main hall there too that were just pure fun. Howard Whitehouse is animal hunting game. Pure fun. What is the best game you've played in your whole X amount of years? And you can give an honorable mention or two. You've been gaming for quite a while, but what's up there in the podium spots?
So what's really interesting, sort of, and I apologize to my beloved ASL friends, but that and the equivalent, where you've got 2,000 counters and you're the army commander and you're controlling every company. That's not, and that doesn't give you the feel. And it's funny because adding more detail to a war game doesn't make it more realistic. And so the best game, my favorite game, I have a second favorite, but my favorite game on Antietam is Pub Battles Antietam, which you play with wooden blocks. It's sort of a Kriegspiel game, but it is from McClellan, from Lee's position. There are other games like Worthington's Brigade series are really good at being simple, and you learn a lot, and that's close to it. But as far as controlling what Lee or McClellan would have controlled, it's no lower than division, and you're doing, and it feels right, and with one house rule, it's the most accurate at the army level. And then here's the fun part: Pub Battles Antietam. So I bought the paper map, I took it to Staples, and I had them make a double size vinyl map, so it's pub safe. And so it's vinyl and wood. And so I've played Pub Battles Antietam in 2 different pubs.
Nice.
There is a pub in Shepherdstown, which is where Shepherd University is, like 5 miles from Antietam.
Yeah.
And Shepherd George Tyler Moore Civil War Center, which I work with. Shout out to Shepherd University, great people. But I've played it in a pub in Shepherdstown and Pittsburgh here. If you ever come to Pittsburgh and if you have any Civil War interest, we have this place called Arsenal Cider. It's a local alcoholic cider bar, and the one literally 12-minute walk from my house up the hill. has a second floor room that's rarely used, and so I've run Pub Battles Antietam in almost my own private game room. And again, alcohol safe, so you can spill your mustard and your cider. So that's one. So 2 and 3 really quickly in succession. In addition, we'll end up with the 2.5 by 32 foot long game at end. The other one, ludicrously similar to that. I'm really fortunate that, like you said, 1/72nd is very rare in the US for outside of a few nerds like me at Historicon as a scale. But I've got 3 different people, one being my youth gamer, my lead youth gamer, Mateo, and one being one of our other retired gamers who all play in 1/72nd. So a couple years ago, Mateo and I put together all of our stuff, and we played the nearest end of Omaha and the nearest end of Gold.
Oh, wow.
And it was 10 feet wide. We put a break in the middle so you could walk between, because you can't reach comfortably.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 6'2", so I can, but I don't want, I want people to reach their own units. But anyway, so 10 foot wide, and it was really long, but it gives the sense, at least, by having Oysterham in the middle and just the edge, the nearest battalions of the 29th and the first, and then the nearest battalions of the 50th British at Gold. And then it goes 7 miles deep, 16 feet long, so that you've actually got the German. Historically, that's how far back that the 105 batteries that were like dug in it. They weren't in pillboxes, but they were just, in. But it gives you a sense, and honestly, you don't do much back there, and so all the fighting was at the beach, but it gives people, you want to give people a sense of history, not just moving around and rolling dice. So like how big this was, and the other thing that I did with that one that I really liked was communicating, like, okay, you had the 82nd 101st way off Utah, and you had the 1st Airborne way off the other edge. So I did a single roll and people dropped weird, because a lot of the airborne drops were all over the place. So I had just in case that there was a one tiny chance roll that every turn that a lost infantry parachute company might wander in from the American or British end. And it never happened, but it gives people a sense of
all the confusion and what's going on. Yeah.
And exactly. And how big a space you're talking about. Like, okay, here's where the airborne could come in, but they're not, because they're miles. There's several table lengths that way, and there's several table lengths that way, and this is how big a thing we're talking about. So
and that was about a 2-hour war game. What was that?
Right, exactly.
8-hour war game. What was that?
It's never more than 5, because we only can game when the museum is open from 10 to 4. So
got it.
They did let me come in and set up the night before.
Okay,
do come in early in the morning, but that was more than an hour and a half setup.
Jeez,
imagine.
I'm looking forward to talking more about Lexington and Concord. The only other, we got 2 questions left, and again, I think the audience is getting to know you very well. So this is awesome, and getting kind of a real the depth and knowledge that you have in the experience of the wargaming community. So we hear it all the time about people transitioning and to games, periods, or groups, when and what, and if you did transition in the hobby, fantasy, and historical. I think you talked a little bit about the transition, especially from the things you did with chit base and anything else like that. Have you found in these last few decades here that have been in the hobby, like I've seen, some of the stuff that you've posted is where you're really trying to, I think, maybe the games that you played and when you played them were for fun. I see you as like even storytelling and bringing people into the hobby. I think and I'm thinking that's a transition in my own mind. It might not be. I think you might have had that bug with you the whole time. What are your kind of thoughts on that and the transition?
Completely. And I've got a lot of dear, not just military, but storytelling friends. And shout out one state south of us to the International Storytelling Center in Jonesboro, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So if you want to become a good military storyteller, it has nothing to do with the military. It's just, go see the best storytellers and learn from them. And, to the point, everyone who comes to the museum knows they're going to get a little storyteller. And thank God for my wife, because my wife, I'm an only child of an only child. And if it wasn't for my long-suffering wife, I used to never shut up. So I give people a bit, just leave them wanting more. But I do every time before I proceed, as I'm teaching the rules, as we're going to talk about during Lexington and Concord. It's like, okay, what happened? What are because I don't want to add hamstring rules. One thing I don't like is, okay, we're going to have this battle and we're going to put these artificial rules to, and here's my pet peeve. And anyone, McClellan, okay, McClellan is an idiot. I'm not a big fan of his on the Peninsula campaign, but he did okay at Antietam. Yeah. And you don't need to hamstring it. And that's like pub battles at Antietam. When you play pub battles, you don't need to add a McClellan idiot rule.
Yeah, like a -1 or something that just is.
Well, no, even just that. Just the difficulty of crossing Antietam Creek, where the units are at the beginning point, and just the command and control issues of doing that. And with the Union having the external lines and having to spread that command and control out, with the Confederates having the internal lines, like it's reverse Fishhook. It's the reverse of Gettysburg.
Yeah.
Where the Confederates are on the inside this time. Just the natural conditions and normal rules do it without having to have these artificial. So you teach history, but you teach history through how you game master and how you set up the scenario. And we're going to get into that. And that's.
No, I look forward to. I'll let Windhurst. We might have it answered, but go ahead, Windhurst. I'll let you ask.
Yeah. So just the last one. What other games are you kind of playing nowadays that you haven't kind of already mentioned in your favorite rule sets?
So again, on the simpler side, and I play of all complexities, but people want to mention our Worthington in general does a great job of simpler, high quality board games that it's of many periods. Worthington Publishing, a friend of mine, Bill Molyneux, who talking about really simple, like makes Worthington and other stuff seem really complicated. And he designs board games of battles that are sold in museum gift shops. So he's got like a battle on Germantown, and it's sold at Germantown. He's got and he does like a French Indian. He has the French and Indian and the War of 1812 battles have a little map, and it actually has on the map shows you where the British and the Americans set up. So you don't even have to. There's no hex numbers. It's just here's your 10 counter, and it's like 10 pieces or 8 pieces, and it's 5 turns. It's fast, but is it as good as playing Terrible Swift Sword? Not as often, but again, 95% of them aren't going to play Terrible Swift Sword.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It is absolutely it's simpler. If Command and Colors is too complicated, Bill really catches the sweet spot, and he can games like his really capture that great.
I have to say this now because the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about Lexington and Concord. And so when we interviewed, Jeff and our buddies in Ashland, is they basically took a rule set and they developed this scenario for it to create a historical setting, and they played through it with people, and people came up to him, and Jeff was telling us they had school children come up in buses and everything, and in my mind that kind of adds to where I'm sure they had friction. They talked a little bit about hey, we're teaching people, but again, Fire and Fury, the rules that they're playing was, I'll say, pretty streamlined, especially if you got a GM at the table. Your whole purpose is you are catching people that are not wargamers, I would say, for a good part of what you're doing. So hey, grab your carabiner, grab your extra rounds, we're jumping this table. You got to be able to go and, get that person caught up to snuff. So that just, I think, adds to your style, and people who are looking to mimic that, or if they're like, hey, I'm going to put on a game, or I'm a war gamer, I'd like to do something for my town's festival, for this museum, or for anything else. I think Pitt History Guy, and we're going to hear here shortly, is a good template to build off. And he's very, we'll put up his contact information as well. Reach out to him with other additional questions that I'm sure we won't even answer in this time. But, okay, the listener has been listening for about an hour. We've talked about Bastogne. We've talked about Ukraine. We've talked about Virginia. We've talked about everything in the world. Now let's talk about Lexington and Concord. And me and Windhurst are, we had different laid plans, I'd say, for what we were going to start the game in, but we wanted to in the spring. We were like, man, the 250th coming up, we need to get back into this. Me and Windhurst are painting our own kind of Bunker Hill project to kick off this the American War of Independence, and we wanted to get that militia against this mighty British Empire, and we talked about doing a Lexington and Concord. And I'll be honest, when we were researching it and when we talked to Pitt History Guy, we were like, wouldn't that just be a skirmish? Wouldn't that be something else? And then I started talking to you, and yeah, maybe Lexington, but I started talking to you, and I was like, well, if you play the whole thing out and as it extends and the British retreating, you're going to have a lot of forces. And I was like, I wondered how long that table would be, or I wonder, could you do that on a 6x4? And then Pitt History Guy messaged me, he's like, yeah, I did this a while back, and it was a 32-foot table, and I was like, what? Maybe he meant me. I don't know. What did he mean? But it couldn't have been feet. But yes, viewer and audience member, and Yorkshire gamer, I hope you in the great England mecca of wargaming have heard like, oh, big tables, big battles, big games. You tell me when you've done a 32-foot table, all right? And then you come knocking for Pitt History Guy. That's what Estados Unidos gives you. No, I'm kidding. I don't want to make all our foreign listeners mad. But so I think it's important. We wanted to ask you.
Save the Queen.
Yeah, we wanted to ask you a lot of questions about this, and especially with your kind of analysis on going into it. So I think where do we start is I want to say the inspiration, and we're gearing towards your 32-foot table. The inspiration for this project, where does that come from? How did you get the bug bit for this?
And of course, we all hear about Lexington and Concord, but we hear about is two things. We hear about Lexington Green.
Yep.
And then we hear about the bridge.
Yep.
And again, we're here to both instruct and to entertain. And the important thing to remember, so it's like, I want to do this because it's the first, thing of the war, and everyone does Bunker Hill, so fine. But and Bunker Hill's pretty well set, and there's little controversies, but it's pretty well defined.
Yeah.
But then you go into, and even my beloved Bruce McFarlane, and it probably doesn't come across, but you can see that's the whole the way they do it is by putting a bunch of buildings, and it's sort of seek and find.
To the listener, he's showing. We'll post the map, but if you're just listening to this, he's showing a page of the McFarlane scenario from that Wargames wall from the hard book rule set.
That's Lexington and Concord, but the whole thing is only 8 feet by 4 feet, and it's not. I mean, you've got to understand that both those things that we just mentioned, Lexington Green and Concord Bridge, weren't intentional. There's no reason to game either of them. Both sides were like, even after Lexington Green, as they were marching farther to Concord, no one knew if it was still
what's going to happen.
Fight. Or the British certainly weren't trying to open fire on, even when they crossed Concord Bridge and they sent the flying column off to try to abscond with the cannon and whatever they could find. And it wasn't. And I want to add one thing to show how much that it wasn't a battle, and it's so you can't really war game it because there wasn't intentional fighting. So after the one group of there's 700 guys, there's about 350 light and 350 grenadiers under 2 officers. Under that initial flying column that crossed the middle of the night, they're with minimal, just one load of ammunition. Anyways, but lots of details to go into. But regardless, so they go, they look for things, they find a few things, they don't find most of it. But after they do this, and after the British are going in armed, and this is after Lexington and Green, after they've killed militia, they go into this pub in Concord after they've absconded, after they've tried to look for stuff, and after they've done that, they go in and order breakfast from the rebel aligned pub owner, and they pay for it.
Nice.
So this isn't war. So you don't. I mean, it's great to understand, and even like the sub part of that. And this is where I want to get into. So I there were a lot of books. I even looked. There was this nice, expensive $30 book that I thought, oh, this will be fancy. This is this is British. Oh, the Caliber books, and this is this. Who did this one? Partisan Press, which is well known. It's like, oh, part of the press is well known, and this is an expensive book, and it's from a good publisher. There's a lot of detail. There's Lexington and Concord.
Yeah, yeah.
And you got to realize that that Lexington and Concord are like miles apart, miles, not a couple.
I think most publishers though are thinking, what rational human being is going to make a 32-foot table there, Pitt History Guy? So,
but the problem is that if you're not going to do it, don't try to take something and don't try to shrink it so someone could think that because you're not understanding anything.
The abstracting, the abstracting of it can break down kind of because you're steeped in the history. The abstracting of it is you're taking away from, hey, what causes this shot heard around the world? I totally agree with you.
So again, of a certain age, there's 2 Atlas books that are really affordable. Battle of the American Revolution, which has a few battles, but like goes down and goes through the organizations of stuff. Then there's the one, if you just want an overview, there's a Revolution and Civil War book, Battlefield Atlas, that are really great. And they cover like pretty much every significant thing in the Revolution in the Civil War in red. But between the 2 of them, it gives you a sense of scale. And then I went online and I found more detail. But then the real find of this and that really started bringing the aha of this, was a book, and I've been very sad that it hasn't gotten any press coverage, because it's a 2015 book by an he's a reserve Air Force officer, Windhurst. So he's an 05, and Derek W. Beck, and I can't recommend this highly enough. And it's called Igniting the American Revolution. And go back to talking about free. There's a library app called Hoopla that a lot of people get with your free library card. You can read Igniting the American Revolution as an ebook. You can listen to it as an audiobook, free. It has both versions of it, free on the Hoopla app. So if you don't have time to read, while you're commuting, while you're doing anything else, while you're walking your dog, and it is the best book, and it goes from before the Boston Massacre all the way up through the end of Lexington and Concord, and it really. So the one side, the scale, I can get from maps.
Yeah.
But as far as the detail, it's like understanding. And you don't, in a war game, you want to be fun, so you don't want to over-script it. One thing I don't like is, okay, we're going to make these gamers, experience every, and we're going to guide them so they have to make the exact same decisions.
Yeah.
And we're forcing them to do that. It's like, I want people to feel that they're in charge.
And we've talked about this before with it's fun to play Rorke's Drift. It's fun to play the Alamo, right? But I think in my 30 plus years of wargaming, I've seen the Texans win the Alamo once, and somebody had to have loaded dice, right? You know how that's going to play out. And so the 32-foot, in my mind, just with the inspiration, we see where the inspiration is coming from kind of in this, but I have to ask this with the 32-foot map is, you are seeing this, we're going from the midnight ride of Paul Revere, we're getting into the militia, absconding and doing those things, and the British hunting them out. You're thinking that distance, whether you want to play the search or whether you want to play the retreat, which way are you leaning? How are you doing that?
Exactly. So for a war game, the only thing that's viable is to play the retreat. If you want to play the search, this White to Their Eyes gives you a good, a cute, a fun little thing, and the scale's wrong, but it gives you the right thing of going and playing. But it's not a word game per se. It's it's can Sam Adams hide well, and it's cool. And it gives you that understanding. But it's not roll and shoot at the other side. So
it's an RPG. Sam Adams rolls for dexterity, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, dungeons and pubs, right?
Dungeons and pubs. Oh, that's awesome.
But so we talked about after Concord Bridge, and that was an accident too. That wasn't.
Yeah.
But once that happens, it's wholly expletive.
Yep.
And once that happened, once the Americans and the British fire at Concord Bridge, it's on. But even there is not where I start my game. Yep. Because again, if you read Igniting the American Revolution or listen to it, the first place, it's that point the British are like, we can't find anything else. We've got 700 guys, we got a whole bunch of angry militia, and there more are coming. So we got to get back to Boston. And so the other thing to remember is that even before Lexington Green, when the British started running early in the morning, started running into Revere and equivalence. And then he was like, because this was meant to be a surprise. They meant to like go in the middle of the night and capture the supplies and get out of there. They didn't want to have a fight. They just wanted to grab military supplies and get back to Boston. Yeah. So they still completed the resistance. But even before Lexington Green, they sent a messenger back to Boston that says, send reinforcements. And so you've got those initial 700 light and grenadiers, and they're going to that. And then ultimately, and slow, there's another 1,000 guys. So all those light and grenadiers, were peeled off from line regiments. So the line regiment, so the 1,000 guys are from the line companies of the regiments that the light. So they're used to being together, and so the line guys want to go save their friends, just like your units. It's like when you're, and sometimes units are split apart for special things, but that it's your buddy. It's not just another regiment. This is, these are people that you break bread with.
Yeah. It's the warrior ethos. We talk about it all the time, and I'm sure that. I think to what you were saying with the research in it, and the research I've done to what's going on there is, the British were probably the ones that are in the most, lack of intelligence in reporting and stuff, because basically once, the Midnight Ride and the other two people that nobody knows their names besides Paul Revere, once that all happens, like everybody's pretty well aware of what's going on. And that's why my understanding is all the guns, all the equipment, everything's gone. The militia are kind of ready. And so the British are thinking they're walking into this, oh, we're going to catch them. And then, as you said, the morning wanes on, we go into here, and then it's like, I'm sure tension is like, just all abounds in the air, and you have this pop that goes off here. So I like how you said that, though. If somebody is looking to wargame that, it's not going to be a traditional wargame. That's going to be like a search and destroy, or maybe I've seen like the where you have civilians that are controlled by the enemy player and they're moving through. That's going to be a different war game. You said if you're going to play this as an actual war game, it's going to be kind of more of the retreat would be.
Right, and it's not even at Concord Bridge. So even once they fired each other at Concord Bridge, both sides are like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Because, there are, and again, igniting the American Revolution goes into this. There are rebel families whose daughters have married British soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the British, even the rebels still thought of themselves as British subjects. They weren't looking initially to break off. But anyway, but what I'm saying is, so even at Concord Bridge, when you have that first firing of both sides, that doesn't continue. That's not worth wargaming, because that's as soon as they start, they stop quickly. Well, and then once they've come to their senses, the rebels start. That's when on the way back, and so there's a place called Miriam's Corners between Concord back to Lexington, which is actually where the first place where these converging rebels intercept, and that's what my game's about. It's the British, and they're following. It's only 2.5. It's only one table wide. It's only 2.5 because the British aren't looking to. It's a narrow, long.
Yeah, Boston's thing. Which way? That way? Okay, that's where we're going, right?
And then once you get to exactly, and once there's a place at Monotony where it actually the road tees.
I'm going to kick this. I'm going to kick this to Windhurst for the rule set and scale, because I think those questions will go together here. I think when we looked at your inspiration and your research, and this again to make it broad, we're talking about Lexington and Concord. So you've listened to Pitt History Guy talk about the books, the firsthand accounts that he's digging into to say, okay, Pitt History Guy is a veteran wargamer. He knows how rules interact. He knows how these things interact. And he's like, no, this isn't it. This isn't really where it is. Well, how do I want the game portrayed? You see it as the retreat, right? We all know it's the retreat of the British going back there. So he wants to capture it then. And he's going to, he obviously hates the person who comes up to the table and wants to play the British, because he's going to try to make them move these figures 32 feet on a table. But you get to see where he's already in his research, in his accounts of the battle. He's saying, okay, I'm a storyteller. This is where I want to start the story. Right here, this is the epicenter of where I see, okay, we're starting to push back, where the rebels are converging. This is kind of the tinderbox for it. It's not the shot at the bridge. That somebody just had a negligent discharge is probably the shot heard around the world, right? It fired into the air or whatever. But that's super interesting. I want to kick it to Windhurst right now, and he'll ask the next two questions. I think they'll go together, but then it's how do we play along for that? But again, I know there's viewers and listeners that are just thinking about when we talked to Jeff and them last time is how do you start bringing these things to the table? And you hear it's the first-hand accounts, right? A lot of us who are wargamers, historical wargamers, and Pitt History Guy is doing exactly that. He's diving into, hey, let me check out these books. He's giving you a lot of good resources already. I've got a decent amount of them with the Atlas and everything else. Like he knows what he's talking about. So Windhurst, I'll kick it to you to continue expounding on this.
Yeah. So before I tie into these questions, I just want to make sure I'm tracking. So your inspiration was looking at Lexington and Concord and seeing the way that other games had been doing it, and realizing as you were researching it, so it's kind of in tandem. I'm looking at this game, researching it, and then realizing the way other games are doing it doesn't make for a good fight.
And
so
it's not accurate. You're not.
Right.
There is no fight.
So how can you make a battle that is a fun game to play, but also ties in the history? Is that accurate?
Exactly. And how are you going? How are you making both the American, the rebel decisions, and the British decisions? And they're very simple decisions from the standpoint of which is that. So these 700. So one part of the scale. So you've got 700 British guys. So it makes no sense to do 1 to 50. You've got to have enough British guys. So you're going to do a more of a skirmish, not quite. So I did 1 to 20, which gave me 35 guys, soldiers, which, and that worked well from, if you look at about 2,000 militia, and that's historically, so that ends up about to be 100, but they're coming in, and then, so you're rolling, the Americans are getting, as historically, but we're not going to do that, this company came down from this, but we're going to, because the rebels didn't know what was happening. It was like everything was,
right.
So you're rolling random locations for random numbers of militia to show up anywhere along the path, north or, and you're flipping a coin for north or south, and then you're rolling a die on how many show up, and you're rolling a die on where along that thing, and they might be showing up way back at Concord, and they might be useless because you're never going to catch up.
Well, that's a great way to show how you're even you're keeping the same, just from your accounts of the historical record of kind of what happened, is you're keeping the same pressure. But me and Windhurst have talked about this we talked about like Lake Trasimene or some of these battles, ancient battles that you can't really play twice. It's like, okay, who am I? I'm the Romans, and I'm marching down this road near this big lake, and I'm just marching, and I don't know what's going on. Wonder what's going to happen. But you're keeping that tension and the surprise, but it's still historically accurate in the sense of like, hey, this aren't the guys coming from New Haven or whatever that are end up 50 here like they did on 10:30 on that morning. No, these are the guys that are, hey, they're coming at this time, and there's a little bit of tension to it that causes, I'll say, it to be played, a variety of different ways, but to also be a surprise and feel the way it did. Go ahead, Windhurst.
So on scale though, did you go with 1/72nd because that's just your bread and butter, and that's what you're already used to? So then it was just kind of assigning a number of figure to kind of, you said 1 to 20. You just had to make it gameable.
Right, to give them enough so they can take casualties, but to have few enough that, given the scale of that,
right.
It's not so much seven, but given you've got 700 British and then another 1,000 British, and you've got maybe a couple thousand. It's like what's the reasonable number of soldiers that you can, and I'll generally have between 4 and 8 people play any one game.
And did that ground scale tie into your table size scale? Is that how you came upon
exactly?
And then since you're going through all this research and other rules and not being satisfied, did you end up borrowing from other rules or any mechanics and scenarios, or you just had to come from scratch your own stuff?
It was just that. I mean, the rules were fine. The McFarlane rules were great as is. All I did was the skirmish. They have battle rules, and then they have skirmish rules that goes to 1 to 15. So all I did was cinch it down a bit so I could, instead of being 1 to 20 instead of 1 to 15, and then I cinched the scale. The thing 1 foot is 150 yards in skirmish level for there, and so once I cinched down the 3/4 size for the figures, I also cinched the scale down of distance 3/4 size. So a foot is on the table is 240 yards. So a 32-foot long table is 4.4 miles. Now, historically, again, this is again, this is a game, so
Right.
I've only got so big a room. And again, you want to give the sense. You don't need to make, you don't need to have every epaulet and every accurate, but you're just trying to give the sense. And without having that long, narrow table, and again, because the British are going to stick to the road, they're not going to. The Grenadiers are going to be on the road because they're the big, and the light infantry corps are the small guys, so they're going to be on the flanks, and so that's what you do. But they're never going to go very far on the road because their job is not to wander off. Their job is to get back to Boston. But so that table on my scale was 4.5 miles. Now from Merriam's Corner to Menotomy, which was the last battle of the retreat before the British turned off north. So the Americans had an ambush down at Cambridge, and the British knew it, so they went another way. There was a Y at Menotomy, and so that was the end of it. Once they went north,
the other way,
that was the end of the historic thing. But the historic thing was about 7 miles instead of 4.4 miles. But it didn't,
Right.
But if I'd only done 2 tables, it wouldn't have, really 4 tables really gave people the sense. And then what really does it is that we talked about the American decisions. It was like, if you've got a few guys coming in, do you have them attack, or do you wait for more reinforcements and hope they come in nearby and then group more so you can have a more effective attack? So that's the Americans' decision. It's like how much do you press and how much do you wait? So the British decision is the British are always going to beat the Americans because these are trained things. But the problem is the British only have 1 load of ammunition. And they've been fighting. And so every time they fight, 2 things happen that are bad for the British. What are those?
Their ammo goes down.
Yeah, the ammo goes down, exactly. And once you've had about, and I will say about 10 shots, we start having the British roll for running out of ammunition, which is what happened historically. Before they got back to Lexington, forget Menotomy. They actually ran out of ammunition before they hit Lexington. And once they ran out of ammunition, they started running. the brave Grenadiers and Light Infantry, because there's thousands of militia coming at them, even though they're individually no good comparatively. They're,
Well, go ahead, Windhurst.
Yeah. So when we're asking that question about like special rules and how you got the friction. So the friction for the rebel player is that this kind of random generation of forces and how to use them. And then the main friction sounds like for the British is limited resources. You got to make it count.
Right.
And so
and
like Kentucky was saying about making sure you can play the same fight multiple times and it be different every time.
Exactly. Because the reinforcements will show up differently for the Americans. So the other thing with the British is not just running out of ammo, but every time you stay and fight, what happens? That's more turns that rebels can bring in reinforcements. So I can kick your butt if I'm the British, but the longer I stay and kick your butt, 1, I'm going to run out of ammo ultimately, and 2, more guys keep coming.
Yeah, I'm going to be cut off.
So it's the Hydra, even though it's a poorly trained Hydra, it's still a Hydra, and so you've got to think, when am I going to run, and when am I marching back down the road, and when am I going to stand and fight? And it's funny because the British in my game, even though you tell them and they know the limitations, the thing is you want to fight, and so you enjoy kicking the rebels' butt. And then even though they know that they're getting in trouble, they fought more than the historic British did. And I warned them, but it's more fun to fight and win.
Right.
Even though it's, you win the skirmish and you lose the...
That's the good part about a war game when it's like, okay, I'm going to pick up all the soldiers I just led to their death, and it's not me. I'm not running.
No.
I'm not running. The other question I have for you is like, I wanted to ask that because the tension you got, the random generation with the militia, like Windhurst was talking about, it's flavorful, it's realistic in the militia coming in from different angles, but you said like 4 to 8 players. So at a minimum, you got 2 like militia players maybe. What have you?
Many. Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and so you've got easily 2 British players because the Grenadiers and the Light can have 7 players. 16 is, and it makes for a fast game, which each has 16 players. And then, of course, the more militia comes in, then ultimately someone who comes in late, because that's another thing about the museum. People don't all show up at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
So and as more reinforcements come in, someone walks in at noon. Oh, here, you can we need another thing. Oh, and here's where the 1,000 British come in from Boston. You're going to take over. You're going to do that. So it's really nice when and you're trying to be welcome again. This isn't a game club where we're all showing up
Yeah.
at 6 p.m. at night and running till 10.
Well, me and Windhurst have played multiplayer games, and I think there's something to be said. Multiplayer games where it's like, it's really a 1v1, but you've got a buddy playing off to your right shoulder, and not a lot depends on it. The thing that I think really adds to a multiplayer game is when I'll say the mission, the intent is interdependent. And so if you have these British players that are kind of relying on each other, like, hey, I'm going to need your light infantry to help me out. Like, let's keep moving. What are you doing? I get it. You nailed one of the farmers. Like, let's go. And if you've got the militia players kind of in the same interdependence with each other, if they're like, hey, you just rolled for reinforcements. I need them now. And he's like, I've got 5 guys. Like, what can I do to you? I just think that adds so much more to multiplayer games than like, hey, Windhurst is on my right side. He's got 300 points. I got 300 points. Like, hopefully, he takes his wing. I take my wing. But I love how your game has that interdependence already kind of like baked in, where you're going to have tension. That person that's on your side of the table, you're going to have to talk to him. You're going to have to hopefully coordinate. And most times, maybe he might not listen to what you have to say about, good luck, Lights, stay by yourself. That's awesome. I want to highlight that because I think it's missed in multiplayer games where they just become 1v1s on bigger tables.
And then we take it. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Windhurst.
Well, you mentioned something, and I want to make sure I understood. When you're running this at the museum, you run it as one game throughout the day usually, and that way people. Okay, yeah, because that makes more sense. That's a really clever way then, where you have built into it a mechanic where people can show up and just grab forces. Because that's something I know Kentucky and I, when we're trying to organize group games, it's hard to make it work easily for someone to come in late. But that sounds like a really clever way. And because we didn't mention it so much at the beginning of this section, but one thing we're trying to do is not only show the process you took, but to give insights for other people on doing a project of this scale. So that's, again, something I also wanted to highlight again. If you're trying to work a big, long game like this somewhere else, having a built-in mechanic like that's really clever.
And I love more complex games, but you can't. Someone, again, especially someone who's new to it, who's walking in. If I'm running Johnny Reb 3, even if I've got guys showing up later, I can't teach a newbie Johnny Reb 3 rules.
Yeah.
In the middle of the game while everyone else is, because you got to keep the game going. So if you have a really simple set of rules that's like, and even the summary and having learned your stuff, you want. You want rules with your with the quick reference sheet, and they have the quick reference sheets. So and it's like 2 pages, and it's simple.
Build off Windhurst's point too, though. We've seen this. So there have been one thing that can really hurt a multiplayer game is, especially with interdependence in between the players, is somebody does Leroy Jenkins type stuff, right? That famous video where he goes into the room. Have you seen, like, I assume, you have so many a variety of players, but like if a grenadier charges in, their infantry, they start going west. They leave the road. Yeah, they go west. They're like, I'm going to keep going. Let's drive them all the way to the Manifest Destiny. Right. Or if you have a rebel player that's like, you know what, I'm going to keep hoarding them. And it's like, hey, bro, you've got 50 guys over here. Like, what are you doing? You're waiting for another reinforcement roll. What have you seen with that, with your game? And like, talk a little bit of that. Can your game be broken? Have you made it? Have you built in ways to avoid that? Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, any game can be broken. So
yeah,
this one didn't, fortunately, because there was enough different. And then to the point of talking, that's another important thing about this, which is that I didn't let anybody talk unless they were within 12 inches. Historically, there's no walkie-talkie, there's no, there's no field phones. So if you've got one group on table 1 and you've got 30 guys coming down, and it's more like 20. I limited it. I think the largest size I allowed in was, and it was I read about the size of I went geeky, and it's like I looked at the relative size of the different companies that came from, and so I made the random size that they fit the range of the companies showing up. But so there's no giant thing. But exactly. But if someone's showing up 2 miles down the road, they ain't coordinating. They can, better than historic, because historically they're not going to know that that guys are shooting between mothers on them, but they can see it, but they can't court, and so they can sort of like. It's funny. You can watch them vibrate like beaker getting ready to explode because.
Man, it'd be great if somebody attacked right now.
Yes, no, completely right, exactly. And so, like the same with the British, the grenadier and the light infantry officers can talk to each other, but they don't know when their reinforcements, and even when the reinforcements show up, they can't say, "Could you shoot this militia over?" It's until they get within 12 inches,
you can talk. Yeah.
Other than that, it's like.
So I've often looked at that, especially for my World War I games, because I like to simulate that difficulty in command and control. Like everything has to be written orders or signaling. But when you're introducing new players into a game, how do you kind of manage that no talking without being like, hey, almost like stomping down on people? It's just like, or like, oh, well, I can't even talk to the guy. Like, how do you balance that so that they understand the historical aspect and why you're doing it without feeling like, why can't I?
I think you answered your question, which is that one, I give the framework, I give the history of it, but two, we don't let people not talk, but we make sure that it's fun banter. So so silence would be crushing because more important than any of the stuff than painting soldiers is making friends. Yeah, and then of course you make friends so you can make fun of them when they roll badly.
Yes, exactly. That's it.
But you have to make friends first.
That's a direct quote.
Before you make friends. Right. You have to make the friends and then make them close enough that you can really grind them into your.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly to the point. You're never going to do it. But I think that by keeping friendly banter and facilitating the fun conversation, and you can talk generally about the history, about the game, and you can ask people like, what are you thinking about? And so you don't want to be completely strict nerdly, like no one talking, so I think keeping,
you're playful about it. Yeah, you're playful about it in the sense of,
and forget the game, just keeping people entertained.
Well, the Windhurst, that was a great question because again, it's like he's hosting this for the museum. He's getting other people into the hobby. My follow-on question to that is just with your experience and you being there at the museum and helping out. And again, the whole purpose of this is one, the people are going to have fun through a wargaming lens, but they're also learning about history. Are you presenting what I would say like almost as a cinematic battle is going on, where you're being like, you're explaining the musket, or you're explaining, do you do that periodically? I assume you do. Or do you find yourself doing that? You said if your wife's there not to close your mouth, like, are you saying like, hey, this is what's going on? And please God, tell me. I just learned about this in my research, which again, Pitt History Guy, you gave me. There is a model on that table, and he is Samuel Whitmore. You have painted up a model to be right. Samuel Whitmore.
That's fair.
So Samuel Whitmore, for everybody who doesn't know, was, I don't know, Pitt History Guy, correct me, he's like 60-some years old when it happened. He's 60 years old or something when it happens. I looked up his tombstone, and it was after I was researching this battle. I was like, I have to know this. So he was then 80 years old. He was 80 years old when it happened. He sees the British retreating. He starts getting his musket out, and he shoots he shoots one as they're going down the road, kills him, shoots another one. This guy's 80 years old. All right, I don't know what he's living on.
Ancient back then.
And
if I remember right, this was a monotony. He was
this correct. Yeah,
He was at the very end in the house.
And so the British see him. They're like, oh, there's musket smoke coming from that. Let's go take this guy out. And so 3 British soldiers come to him or whatever, take him out. But guess what an 80-year-old has in 1775? Who loves liberty? He's got 2 pistols. And as soon as the British come at him, he kills the 2 British, right? And they bayonet him. They shoot him in the face.
And burn the house down.
And they burn the house down. And guess what, great Americans who are listening to this podcast right now, you're thinking, geez, it dies with Samuel Whitmore here at Liberty. No, it doesn't. He lives another 18 years, and he dies at the ripe age of 98. That is the best story from this battle. I myself, when I started looking into this History Guy, because you'd got my flavor juices going, I was like, I am painting a Samuel Whitmore, and he will be on a table anytime I'm in an AWI game.
And generally, to the point, I give the general from, and thank God I had mentioned in my leak, there was this one set of maps from the Jeffrey P. Berry Trust that was just brilliant, and nothing equated that. So the shape of the roads and the creeks, because one of the big things you want, and I'm not going to, you don't know where every shrub, and I'm not going to make every house, but you're going to represent it. And basically, every couple miles, the British have to cross a creek. And when they cross the creek, you got to cross the bridge. And so all those light infantry that are defending your flanks, they've got to come back.
Yeah.
And so every time they cross, and it's several bridges they got to cross. And so there's a few things you put in there. Exactly. It's random. You make sure there's hills and scrub, and there's some open, but there's places for the militia to hide. You make sure there's places that periodically that the British and the militia both have to experience that hourglass in and out. And then to the point, Whittemore's house down in Monotony, and it's on the south side of the road. And that's the one house I made sure was there.
Oh, that's awesome. That's the best. That's obviously that's MVP of that war game right there.
So so the other thing is I don't know if you want. There's one other little detail that's fun.
No, keep talking about this. This is interesting.
And if any of you want to play this game but don't want to be the game master, cut it off right now. So that and listen to it after you've played the game. So the game master does this. So again, historically, all these rebel militia are coming out. Again, this is the couple key things. You don't want them to every little thing, but you want both sides to experience those few key things. Like, do I fight and run ammunition or do I run and just take the losses? But fewer rebels have time to come in, and I'm gonna save my ammo for the really important things. So right before Lexington, the first column breaks. They run back, and in the nick of time, just like A.P. Hill's division coming up at the last minute at Antietam, or pick your favorite thing, the reinforcements show up. Literally, they were on the hill east of Lexington. Couldn't have happened. This is like, if you watch this in a movie, you'd be like, nah, come on, the timing is, that's
the Riders of Rohan.
Things don't time that well in reality, and exactly happened. And so there's the 1,000 reinforcements on the hill as they're breaking, and they run back to behind the guys with more ammunition and more thing, and then they are able to reform, and they're all together. They go back, but the punchline is, and here's where the game master does this. Again, we've talked about the 1 to 20 scale. There's only 2 cannons historically that happened, and they came with the 1,000 reinforcements. So I give the British one little 3-pounder. And so the punchline is, and you don't know this unless you've read the book, even with 1,700 guys, or it was about 1,600 probably by this time with casualties, all these militia are still ganging up on them. And the British are still pretty nervous with all these guys coming at them. The British fire the 3-pounder on the hill. What do the militia do? Yep, seeing the elephant, exactly. There's never been a war before. They've fought French Indian, but they were the French didn't have cannons on our side of it down in certainly Native Americans didn't have cannons, and so they were all brave and they were ready to go kick King George's soldiers' butts, and then the first cannon goes. Doesn't even matter if it hits. All the militia within an initial area just scatter and just go away. And the other guys will come on after that, and it only happens once. But that's the one thing that the British didn't get to. And in my game, they never fired their cannon. And so I'm like vibrating because here come all these Prussian militia, and it's like, fire the cannon, and all go away. Your problems will be all solved, at least for a couple turns.
Yeah.
Anyway,
what is so going back to the scenario and everything, and I love how you've talked ground scale, you've talked the rules to make them simple to get people into this. You talked the reason you picked 32 feet, and again with wargaming, you have to take license somewhere to give you the historical feel, and you've kind of annotated like, I'm not going to sacrifice here on these things that I think are flavorable. Like this is actually giving the person who's playing the game the experience of Lexington and Concord and the British. Like, hey, let's get back. Are we going to be able to preserve our forests, or are we going to get swallowed by these militia? And the way you've done reinforcements, everything makes perfect sense on why you've done it. Do you say, you have a few like fun things in there that are historical anecdotes where you get to talk about like with the gun firing and all those, and then you have Whitmore House there. But do you have like distinct victory objectives? And with the British, other than just hey, get back to here on X turn, with the militia, do you the lack of objectives just shoot at anything that's red? Is that more not synonymous to what's going on? What are your thoughts about giving multiplayer games like this with interdependence objectives, and what's the purpose or not of that?
And again, so this is experience, and this is not at all assigning everything a point. And and you can do that, and that's fun. Like I said, the little hunt for the Samuel Adams hiding in the basement, and they all get points, and that's fun for that. But for this standpoint, exactly, it's like, so when you finish the retreat, what I tell the players is, and I don't assign points, exactly like you said. So the British are trying to get back with as many people. Their job is not to kill rebels. Even though that's the fun part, and they got distracted by that more than historically. But the job is to live, so they can write a letter home to their mom and say, "I survived."
To survive, yeah.
And the rebels' job is, we're gonna kill as many of you as possible, or maim, or whatever, and we're just gonna get you. And what I told the players at the end, after all this was over, and the British got back into Boston. And then the rebels, of course, over the day, completely surrounding, leads up to Bunker Hill. The rebels have after this, and certainly in the weeks after, have a siege around Boston. So let me ask both of you: in their own mind, did the rebels win? And in their own mind, did the British win? Historically,
I think that the rebels, in their mind, would have won because now they've bottled them up. I think the British, in their own mind, I don't know if they would have. I don't know if Howe or any of the British commanders I'm thinking of the day of, like, they think that's a success because you came back empty-handed. You burned all the boxes of ammunition and everything, and then if anything, you got skedaddled by this lesser army than you. So maybe you didn't. I don't know, but I could see a way in which you say, hey, the British or the militia flee at the end, so maybe you've kicked them back out. I don't know. I could see both sides of that, I would say.
What do you think, Windhurst?
I would think at the time of when the reinforcements arrive and they drive off the militia, then it probably looks like a victory for the British and a loss for the colonials. But then I think when it moves on, you said, and then they kind of besiege them in Boston, at that point, I'd have to imagine the British commanders have acknowledged they lost the initiative and they lost operational mobility. And so then it kind of sours the victory. It's like, well, we drove them off, but now what do we have to show for it? They weren't able to capitalize on having driven off the militia. So, I mean, that's kind of, but I don't know, that could just be hindsight. I don't know.
It's completely accurate. Exactly. So tactically, both sides that,
we won.
And we weren't expecting to fight. I mean, literally, like, it's sort of, we're joking. It was like, you've got 1,700 British and probably like 4,000 at some point coming and going, all with weapons. I mean, and if you think of like 5,700 people with weapons at any place, not expecting to fight, but both of them tactically thought, like, I did as good as I could have done. And so I served, I fulfilled my duty.
Yeah.
But to your point, Windhurst, it's like, in the long term, of course, operationally, of course, the British not only, are hemmed in, but then, of course, they leave Boston because they can't.
Right.
And then they move down to New York and stuff. But yeah, exactly. So what I explained to them at the end, exactly, it's like, this isn't about points, it's about learning. But at the point, both of you, if the British survive without too many casualties, then they feel proud. You won as much, and so exactly, it's not like you got 37 points and you got 17 points, so you suck and I win.
Yeah.
And so it really, exactly, we don't do, and certainly you learn, and if you're playing What a Tanker, and my T-3045, puts a hole in your Panzer IV-H. Yeah, sir, you lost and I won. But in this
history is rarely so clear.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But exactly, and this kind of thing, both can feel that, and it's nice because then it's really good because, as you know, one of the things you want to do, especially for new gamers, is you want the new gamer to win, but you don't want
That's fair.
you don't want them to feel like they were patronized.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't want
yeah.
to feel like you threw the game. So, and we talked before, it's like you don't necessarily have balanced forces. You don't both have a 300-point force, but with the victory conditions, with the experience of it, you can feel like within my limitations, I did a good job.
You thump your chest when you fire the British gun, or you know,
Yeah.
the fact that the British have ran 32 feet, which is what this wargaming table is. You're like, aha, I was 6 of those feet. My 5 guys right here. You know, that's pretty. I do like that. That is a good way to think of like participation games and putting on demos and stuff where people can leave without the, as we call it in the wargaming world, technical term, the feel badsies.
Right. Exactly.
I'll kick it back to Windhurst though.
Yeah, I'd like to. So this next question, I think, is really going to kind of help people who want to do a large project like this. But asking about the timeline for the project. So once you decided this was a game you wanted to do, how long did it take to execution? And did you have? And I want to kind of tie it in with the next one event. Was there a specific event, or like? It's like, I'm going to do this and I want to do this by this time. I want to have it ready for this event. And if not, was just, well, whenever it's done, it'll be done and then I'll host it. Kind of what did that process look like?
So in reverse order, I will answer the last question because that drove the previous one. So I'm still full-time working, and then I do a lot of volunteer work because that's just, I'll blame my late minister parents who did a lot of community service. And I get a lot of energy out of this. I mean, I guess
We can tell.
Yeah.
completely. No, I'm very lucky. I mean, but to the point. So, I've been doing this. This month is 4 years. I've been running the Soldiers and Sailors Tabletop Gamers at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum in Pittsburgh. The first month was good. The second month, no one showed up. So I did some admin stuff, and the third month and then the punchline is the best turnout I've ever had was last September when my daughter gave birth in Virginia, and I didn't show up. So I was punchline. It's like I should not show up to more of my game days. They could be more popular. And we had like 20-some people and 6 games. But anyways, but with this thing, what I do is I've been fiddling with the schedule, but I've pretty come to an annual. Every month I do something different, and I try to have a little catchy in the phrase, so to the point.
You said May Minor Wars and stuff
Right,
like
May
that.
is Minor Wars, exactly. So we generally try to keep most months within the museums so we don't drive them crazy within their purview, which is Civil War to modern. And then we've talked about Pittsburgh. We got 5 different museums for French and Indian War. So if you're before that, you're out of luck. And then if Revolution and 1812 and Mexican American, no one covers that in Pittsburgh. So I try to, about 9 or 10 months, I try to stay within that Civil War to modern. I've given myself, with the blessing of the museum, with the 250th, starting last year, a monthly American Revolution April. And I always try to have alliteration so it's easy to remember. So like that, Minor Wars May, the M's, or, so June, the only two, June and July, are always D-Day, Normandy, because that's the central part. People come to the museum. If people know nothing else, they know Normandy and they know Gettysburg. So we do World War II late Western theater, and we do Civil War with the emphasis on Gettysburg for June, July. But everything else, so we always knew the previous November that I wanted, because I do the schedule with the museum every November, and I set up the game days. So I knew 5 months in advance that I wanted to do something Rev War. And you're sort of playing with it, and really about 3 months before, it was like, okay, let's do Lexington and Concord. And then it's sort of frustrating because, everyone will tell you, my gamers will tell you how much time that I was like, oh, good, there's something out of the box. I've got the scenario. That's easy. I can just, base and paint the soldiers. I've already got the rules. This will be easy. Then I make the mistake of research. And whether it's a minor thing, like you find out that the scenario has tiger tanks around Bastogne, which there were actually, I didn't even realize there were, but they weren't there until around New Year's.
Yeah.
When they shifted, the SS Panzer divisions from up north to down south. But or a big thing, which is like this was like, this is the game is both much too short, but also much too wide. You don't. It's literally a game about the road and the flanks. There is no, there's no reason to have a 5 foot or 4 foot wide table. And plus having that narrow thing really gives that tunnel vision, because the British, I mean, they're not going to use it anyway, but you want them to, it's not only long, but it's really narrow, and it really communicates that really well. So I knew it was going to be April, so about January, I start thinking, okay, that. And then so thank God, about January, I find Igniting the American Revolution by Derek Beck. And then I start reading other things, and I start cinching that up. So then about 2 months in advance, I start putting together, because the British organization is very well known. The American organization is spotty, but there's some good tables. I want to say, if I remember right, Igniting the American Revolution, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, I think has the tables of every company that showed up. So you don't need to, replicate and you don't want to. You don't want the Americans to feel in control, but it gives you the range of. So about 2 months in advance, I start figuring out how I'm going to model the rebels, and that's not just numbers, but it's also how you're going to limit them and how you want that feel to come. So and then that only takes about 2 weeks, and you got about a month and a half to work on the soldiers. So
did you not have a collection that you could pull from, or did you do?
I had a collection, but they weren't painted.
Okay.
So to the point, I've collected a lot of stuff, and some stuff I painted, like the Civil War stuff I've painted, and the World War II stuff painted. The Revolutionary stuff was something that I always had on my, and when my kids were growing up, you can ask my wife, I kept incrementing collecting stuff, figuring that I would use it someday. And so
as every wargamer does that.
Oh,
right?
yes. The pile of shame, sure.
I'll get to that, yeah.
And that's the nice thing about the British. So I will say, even though I'm a good red-blooded American, the British were first priority to paint. Because too, they've only got 32 guys.
Yeah,
and
you know them.
You want them to look nice. Because and you'll see in my pictures, the British are the ones who have and they have the right hats, I found there was, thank God, for the one set from Waterloo 1815 or something that makes the light infantry with the correct hats. But anyway, so I painted those up pretty, and then with with 3,000, and so it's it's with the scale, it's still 150 guys, and I don't paint all the rebels, but I at least did them some basic. I put the faces on them, and again, I would have done more, but I'm working full time. I've got my
makes perfect sense.
To put this in context, this was a year ago last. So my dad had passed away the previous February of 24, and then we buried him in Arlington in July. So I'm working on on inheritance issues, and my kids are scattered here and there, and so I don't have a lot of spare time.
Yep.
But to the point, I'm really lucky that. And that's something we've talked about this. I've talked this with some other people, which is that, and we've talked about Little Wars. Little Wars is beautiful work. Yeah. I will never do anything as good. I'll never do anything as Mateo. I've got some fantastic modelers in my club. I am not a fantastic modeler, even though I'm a member of the International Plastic Modeling Society, and I'm very active in it. But I'm not a beautiful artistic modeler. But people come for the community and for the history, and and they know it's not Historicon.
Yeah.
And so as long as from, again, the 3 foot, from the arm's length rule, and again, it's 32 feet long, people give me a pass on having, every canvas bag painted on every rebel militiaman when you've got a 32-foot long table and the spectacle that you're providing, and you're
Right.
going, and the history. I mean, they're getting into the thought processes, and of course I painted everything else. So there's purple and brown and black and red. I mean, purple and blue, and so from a distance, as long as 3 feet away, as long as the Americans look like you spilled the Crayola box,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what's authentic. From a
Yeah,
distance.
and it's not regular wargamers coming originally for this game. So
No.
it's not like they're going to be critical really,
Oh yeah, no.
because they have no basis really to go off of. So any painted models looks good pretty much.
And the
Well,
ones who are good do their own stuff. I mean, and it's like,
Yeah.
please, like, and a lot of times we'll do that. It's like, and we'll use stuff from the better painted when that's available.
Well, in my
And, like,
mind,
go ahead.
even to do that in like the 90-day window that you're talking about is truly impressive with full-time job and everything you had going on. I would say I normally when I've gamed French and Indian War, they're some of my nicest painted miniatures, and the Iroquois, to have the tattoos on them and stuff. And then when I've played and I've tried to demo them, I've regretted not having Airfix when the person's like, "Oh, I'm going to move this
Yeah.
war band," and I'm like, "Oh," the scratch. So I think for participation games, I mean, like you are
Oh,
in
yeah.
the sweet spot. You are doing everything like in the sweet spot for sure.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. My 40-year-old Airfix Panther, I told him, it's like, I don't know how many times that some of the barrels have broken off. It's like, and that's fine. It's like, I told him, like, these aren't museum pieces exactly. It's like, touch them, play with them, break them. If I didn't want to be broken, I wouldn't bring them.
Yeah.
And that's something actually I know that Winters has gotten criticism on the way he bases some of his models for thicker bases, because you have to sometimes make decisions when you're going to run games where people are playing with your stuff. And,
Oh, you said Windhurst. You meant me with the Hail Caesar.
yeah, sorry.
stuff.
When Kentucky, when you, because I know, on your ancients, some people don't like your thicker bases. It's like, well, I want people to pick them up without breaking my models.
Yeah, with the ancient, like you're talking like a shield wall or a Roman wall of the scutums. Like I chose a thicker MDF base, and there was one game where they were on a hill, and so it's like a 8-man front, 3 men deep, and it looks like they're one of the people had like commented on my photo. I think I've painted them to a good standard, I'll say. And then one of them's like, "Oh, dude, the base totally crapped these up. They look like they're on a surfboard on a hill." And then in my mind, I'm like, "Hey, I based them that way so that way these are used all the time in participation games and demo games of Hail Caesar. Like, I don't want how many pelums have I had to go searching for when people handle them wrong?" And you hate it, but like you said, I mean, getting back to what you said, Pitt History Guy, it is a social hobby, right? We would all just play against a computer game. You're storytelling with your history. You can tell that in the passion that you have about it, and you're talking about it. Like, hey, what does this mean? What's going on here? What is the rebel commander thinking? What is the British commander thinking? And I'm really now a bucket list item I've added to my list here is we're gonna play your beer game on the Antietam Bridge there. with pints.
Oh yeah.
So that will go
Well,
down.
and
That will happen.
You can't drink on the bridge, but I will say, at Antietam, you can legally drink on the battlefield.
Okay, that's
As long as you're
Windhurst.
not- So as long as you're not in the cemetery or in the monuments, or but you can grass right next to Burnside Bridge. You can set out a blanket and you can.
You've heard it here first, folks. Me and Windhurst are going to get with Pitt History Guy, and there will be a war. I mean, it might be our first actual live battle review. Whoever can hold the camera. But no, that's awesome. And I think that comes forward. Go ahead.
And there's one thing I want to say. So talking about my bad painting. So with my youth gaming, other than getting people in the door of the museum, so the museum is $25 a year to become a member, and
Awesome.
so it encourages people to become members, including families. And then we've had like about 80 board games, whether it's the old 1960s Avalon Hill or some of the new Worthington games or between or Battle Cry that we've got in our collection. Once they become a member, you can check these games out for multiple months. So but the other thing, other than getting people in the door and teaching history, is I'm very big. I have a long history of youth mentoring, and so some of my youth are wonderful gamers. You talked about the Iroquois with the paint, so the hold the line figures that came with some Indians, and I needed some more, so I had some 172nd. I had one of my other youth volunteer, and he took them home, and he based them beautifully and painted them beautifully with all their faith paint marks and everything else. And so and they volunteer to do this. So I don't pay them anything except because they want to. So I'll pay them back by like I'll throw them books or I'll get them models or whatever.
Yeah.
And it works really great. And then something I've done the last year, especially as I'm getting older, and thinning out my collection and just having friends that buy stuff free, I do a free raffle every month of kits and books. Wow. And they don't cost me but a couple $3 a piece. So but for that investment of like 10 or 15 bucks, I'll raffle off. And last weekend was my war game day for American Revolution, and I gave away like 4 books and all different things on Washington and people looking forward to that, and not everyone wants it, but that puts things, and then not only that, but then you get the youth not only paint for you, but they get them to lead games. And,
you're building the bench.
Who start out shy to, and that's the biggest thing is what you're doing here. This ability to talk to strangers. 80% of jobs, roughly, are through not through resumes, not through, your smartphone, and watching these youth
develop
go from
those
being
habits,
shy to taking charge, and in a good way, and not in a empirical way, but just and sharing their thing and sharing their passion. Even one of my youth really surprised me. He was a high schooler. He's like, I've got the old Avalon Hill Battle of Guadalcanal. Can I run that?
Please.
Like, I would have never expected someone this game was, published 50 years before they were born. And it's the passion. It's like,
well, especially, I think it's a kindred spirit in all of us. The three of us here talking is that history has kind of driven us in this hobby. Like, I think the three of us, it has driven us hands down. As somebody who just led a staff ride to Appomattox with my class of 120 military officers, and to hear the things that like people didn't know about the Civil War, I'm like, holy cow. And then it was a question I would always ask people when they came to the 101st Airborne Division. I was like, at a minimum, I was like, who here's seen Band of Brothers? And every year it got less and less. And I was like, whoa. So for you to see that passion kind of grow in youth and people understanding history more, and the adage or the phrase that we're all very well aware of, those who don't know it are condemned to repeat it, right? Like, is you can say, like, hey, here are these frictions, here's what's going on. I love one of the phrases I've heard, because again, this is my little intersection of politics, I'll say in this one was, we're so polarized today, we don't listen to each other, we don't do all those things. And I've listened to the president interviews that I know that are coming up as part of the 250th, and I won't say the president, but I like what he said. He's like, look at what we've survived as a nation. The Civil War, the independence, the civil rights movement, together, getting stronger. Like, we're America, we're going to be able to survive this. And just learning and understanding history and having an optimistic view, I'll say, there's things to be pessimistic about, but having an optimistic view and working together, I think that's what you're getting at. It's an awesome approach. I truly love it. The last question that we have is, before we kind of go on to the wrap up of this, and I want you to kind of plug the Pitt History Guys, I want to just say AAR comments. You've been doing this for a long time. You've been wargaming and growing communities. You gave a class at HMGS Cons about growing communities. For you AARing this event, what are your thoughts about it? Based on the years that you've been in, and you kind of know what your capabilities are, even with your time management on life. When we're recording these podcasts and these episodes, we're hoping to entice other people to kind of walk in your footsteps and do this. So I'm sure you're AAR. I'd like for you to say it with that kind of perspective of, hey, if you're going to replicate this, or lessons you've learned in the past, or those things, and if you want to go with specific with Lexington and Concord, but what are your thoughts on kind of AAR and these demo games or putting these things on?
I want to take this to a really high level, which is, and I'm oversimplifying it, but there's 2 reasons people volunteer. And this includes nonprofits where you're not getting, God bless, people, teachers and national park rangers and people who are putting much more value than they're getting in their paycheck.
Yeah.
Which is that, but if you're volunteering, and I saw this when I coached direct soccer for 14 years, you've got people who do it because they do it for the people they're doing it for. And the other ones are people who are volunteering because for their self-importance, because they don't have enough self-worth and so they do it from a control standpoint, and they're doing it to try to counterbalance a lack of meaning in their life. And I say that because you see that in gaming. You know, you see the people. So when I started my game group 4 years ago, it was me. I ran the games. I planned the games. And as I mentioned last September, and I've several times, there's been a few times when something's happened and I couldn't be there, or I had to be late. And over the time, it's not about me. So when you start it, don't think of it as your group. You know, build that community. And this is project management. You know, how do you get projects to succeed? You spread the ownership. You don't make the gamers, and this is true in professional stuff, you know, even if you're a customer, you make that customer feel like they've got skin in the game. They're not just buying your product. They're from a commercial standpoint. They're not just, you know, in the military side, you know, even though you've got people who are reporting to you, they are, even though they have to follow your orders, you make them feel that what they're doing, whether it's they're on point, you know, through the jungle, or they're cutting potatoes for dinner, that they feel the importance of what they're doing. And it's really come across in my gaming group, and it's coming that it's, even though they know that I'm started this and they're very thankful to me, everyone from the 12-year-olds to the retired people come, and they either have ownership in it and they're willing to step up, or they're at a point in their life, or just in their level of commitment, that they're like, I can't run a game. I don't like painting figures. I can't come in. But because that's not, I respect all of you that do. And so I'm not coming to say, well, you know, and this is where as a preacher's kid, I learned really young. It's like, I'm a very patient person, but I have no patience, that I learned at a young age, for someone who's going to be given something and then complain about it.
Yeah.
You know, if you buy a pizza from me, you can complain that it wasn't cooked right, that I didn't put the right cheese on. If I send you guys a pizza and a 6-pack of beer, you say thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful that my gamers, again, from middle school to retired and in between, either step up and to the level that they're comfortable with. And it might be a simple thing, it might be a complex thing, it might be something that requires painting, it might be something just running a simple board game. And if they're not, they're just blinking grateful to be able to show up on Saturday and play with nice people. And so they don't, and if I have ugly miniatures, they're still happy to have the experience and to learn something and to have fun and rolling games. And then, you know, they're happy that I'm recruiting people who are prettier painters and modelers than I am. And then so
it works
all
out.
works.
Yeah. It's
Exactly.
a symbiotic relationship for sure. I think your point is well noted. You know, like we talked, me and Windhurst have talked about this. Like if we painted something wrong, somebody comes up to the table and is like, actually, the Greeks and bronze shields, you know, and it's just like, hey, come on, man, like we're playing a game, or whether somebody just wants to be critical of the rules you've chosen or anything, and they've got no skin in the game, but yet the critiques are out the wazoo. Not to say that some are warranted, or, you know, you have that relationship, but there is this social aspect that I think is often forgotten or thrown to the back room as you're embarking on in getting a participation game, a group, or whatever. I want to push it to Windhurst for any final wrap ups. But when we come back to you, Pitt History Guy, and before we go into the last topic, which will be Kit Bag, we're going to come back. I think we're going to interview you again about, when we talk with Matteo, probably about youth gaming and wargaming in that aspect. I think that's got to be in episode number 2, and I know we're pushing over 2 hours, so I want to be mindful of your time. But I'll let Windhurst talk any of the other wrap-up stuff, and then I want you, before we get into Kitbag, to kind of pitch all the social media and websites and where people can link you up. And if anybody is even touching or a few miles from the Monongahela, they know they've got a mecca of wargaming in Pittsburgh based on what they've heard, and I hope they venture to go. So I'll kick it to Windhurst for that. for wrap
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, the only thing I had I wanted to ask for wrap up, the 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 course you taught for HMGS on building community. Do you know if that was like recorded and made available, or it was just an in person?
It
I have
was
his
recorded.
slides.
The audio wasn't very good. I saved the slides. I really need to redub it and do it professionally, and so that it's worth publishing. Other than and to the point, it's certain the slides are available for anyone to take and do as they want and to tweak. But yes, I do want to. Hopefully, in the next year, when
Yeah,
when
because
life
that's
slows down, I do want to put that, and I do have a Pitt History Guy YouTube channel, and I do want to.
yeah. Let us know when you do, because so we can share that. Because literally the main goal of this podcast has been to promote historical wargaming, and because it's more of a niche hobby here in the U.S. than it is elsewhere in the world, most of our listeners need to build communities in order to play where they are. So any resource we can get out to them, to me, is something we can't miss on.
And talk about resources. I would bring us back to Kentucky. And do we want ready to talk about tier free resources?
Well, one
Go
second.
ahead.
Yeah, 1 second. What I want to do is before Windhurst, if you have any other follow
No,
ups.
go ahead.
My first thing is me and Windhurst were Paul. When we started messaging, I was like, "This is perfect." Like Windhurst can tell you, he could feel me smiling as I was talking. I was like, "This guy just has exactly what we were looking for. He's the exact type of person. He's amazing human being. Like, you're our spirit animal. This is what we hope to do. All the things that you've done in the hobby for as long as you've done it. Like, that's the purpose." Me and Windhurst are accountability buddies, and we talk to each other all the time. Like, we had people Sherpa us through the hobby that helped us with painting, history, and everything. And for you to do that for generations is like that's a long term goal. It's just amazing. And this battle to kind of put us in the 250th, and again, I understand it's 1775 is when it happened, but to give us kind of the chutzpah to get into AWI, it was perfect to talk about. And anytime somebody says a war game is 32 feet long, I am like, I really wanted to do that to shoot at some of the people that think they big game when it's not 32 feet long. I know if Yorkshire listens to this, he's going to be like, yeah, but it was only 130 figures. That's like a pipe block in one of his games.
You have to be careful because he's going to throw back his full Waterloo game.
Yeah.
It was like 3 tables.
We hats off to you for everything that you do. I have just subscribed to the Pitt History Guy on YouTube. Check out all of the stuff that he's doing. And again, Paul, just amazing human being. We'll talk about the resources when we get into kit bag and that stuff, but I want you to kind of sell yourself a little bit with, because you could just tell from Pitt History Guy, he is humility abounds. He didn't, when I started talking to him and asking him about my foray into AWI, he gave me a bunch of different resources, a bunch of things to go, just help me out, sent me a book, everything else. It's not about him. It's about how can I expand you? Oh, you're getting into this. Let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. You need to reach out to Pitt History Guy if you're listening to this or if you're viewing it. But where would they go to find you on social media, the gaming groups you're at, and the museum schedule? Where could they? What are those websites? Let the viewers and listeners know right now, please.
So, Soldiers and Sailors Tabletop Gaming, which is on the museum webpage for Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum. But the ones I maintain a Facebook group, which it's private, but you can search it and then I'll let you in. I just look for people who actually have interest. If I don't let randos who don't have any interest, but if you're in some wargaming group, so Facebook, there's a few people who don't do Facebook but do Discord, and so I duplicate all the events there. There's not a lot of interaction, but again, some people don't do Facebook for multiple reasons and do Discord. I also probably the least used resource generally is Board Game Geek. Has a guild function that very people know about that's meant for gaming clubs and hobby shops. And so exactly. And it has a calendar function and there's photos you can put in it. So I created, like I have all of my, if you look at Pitt History Guy on Board Game Geek, you can see my embarrassing collection of, and it's not as bad as some of my friends, which is not, but I've got my collection on Pitt History Guy, but I've also, if you go to Soldiers and Sailors Tabletop Gamers on Board Game Geek, you'll see the account there for Soldiers and Sailors PGH, and that will list the games. So if you come to the museum game day, we don't pull all 80 games down every month, but let us know if you've got a favorite. We'll pull that out in advance. We'll have it ready for you to play. So we've got, again, Facebook, Discord, Board Game Geek Guild, and I just started an Instagram just to
circulate the pictures.
and then, of course, the obvious, I'm also pithistoryguy@gmail.com. I've got a few videos, need to get more doing that.
When you have time, right? When you're not,
Right.
we're over here like running a few game days, and you're running like dedicated game days every month at a museum, as your venue, and you're like, oh, what do I want to do in the next 90 days? How about Lexington and Concord, a 32-foot table? Yeah, so you're not doing too much, I guess, right?
And then second Saturdays at the library in Carnegie. So just to be horrible. So Andrew Carnegie.
Jeez, oh, yeah.
But the town that's named after him is called Carnegie with the second syllable.
Nice.
And there's one of the 5 Carnegie libraries that has an endowment. A lot of them were built, but the only one with an endowment, they have an original, just like Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall was a GAR, was the Grand Army of the Republic meeting place, big one with the big auditorium and stuff. There was a meeting room built into the original library out in Carnegie, out west of Pittsburgh, and when the last veteran died, they closed up the room like a time capsule, and then it sort of fell. But it's been redone. They got a grant. It's a gorgeous room. Next to it is this nice lecture room that has a copy of every photo ever made of Lincoln, and they do a second Saturday at 1:00 every month. They do a Civil War talk there for free. So we've got 4 Civil War roundtables in the greater Pittsburgh area. Plus we've got the Andrew Carnegie Library, not the Carnegie, the main one near Pitt and CMU, but the one in Carnegie.
Yeah.
And then from 11 to 1, I run a simple game on the second Saturday. Me and my friend do before that happens. So,
please look him up, listener and viewer. Everything that you've heard about, look him up. Look at the museum website. Again, go to the Facebook groups. Subscribe to Pitt History Guy YouTube. He's got 21 videos out there right now. Like I just did, and again, reach out to Pitt History Guy. He will help you, and especially if you're talking about this. The next thing that I want him to plug is what he did for me too, as I was getting into it. Is what you've heard in here about the dollar amount and everything that he spent. It's free. So when we talk about Jeff or Yorkshire or any of these people that like to put on big games and do just as Pitt History Guy said, hey, $100 for the rule set, the charts, the tables, a couple of minis that you don't have enough to. He is going for a minimum amount of dollars, and that just allows the entry threshold to wargaming as almost nothing for people, especially with everything else that you see there. So I'll let you pitch some of those that you were talking to me about. And again, especially that somebody's curious about wargaming or getting into it. Some of these free sites, again, with paper miniatures. What are those, Pitt History Guy?
So the paper miniature, there's a website called Junior General. And if you look at Junior General, that was originally constructed for teachers. And you can download cardstock I do cardstock instead of paper, just so it has some, and you can fold them over. And there are from ancient to medieval to Civil War, you can picture of soldiers and tanks and planes and ships. I ran a Civil War game of, I want to say, the Battle of Mobile Bay, and literally every kind of river and ocean going warship, there's a simple colored line drawing of that. I mean, I've got a few 3D ships, but I just wanted to show people that you can do it. You can run a naval battle with some cheap rules, and there's free ones too, but I do some cheap rules off Wargame Vault that I mentioned earlier. But there's all sorts of stuff. If Civil War, there's all sorts of that you can do there, and there's rules, and there's battles, and you can do
scenarios,
fights, and that's completely free.
That's just awesome. What a great resource. There's almost no excuse for if you want to game for fun.
I didn't realize until a few years ago. Yeah, and I'm always pumping, especially and teachers don't have a lot of spare money to help, and it's a great, and anything to interact. The other thing that for those of you who are in HMGS probably know about, but is underused resource is HMGS Next Generation, HMGS Next Gen, which is miniature historical gamers who have either retired or they just aren't playing, 15 millimeter because they've gone to 28 or 12 or whatever in a certain period, and so they donate their painted miniatures and terrain to this nonprofit that was a spinoff of Historical Miniatures Gaming Society. And you can write a very simple grant and it's specifically meant for youth and young adults who are starting new gaming clubs at schools, at libraries, at museums, whatever. And we've got, and even though 172nd is weird, they donated several hundred painted Civil War miniatures to the museum. And I was going to base mine and make them all pretty bases. And the ones that were donated to me have magnets on the bottom. And that got me into, so once it's nice when you've got a few sets, but once you got lots of armies, you can't, keeping shelves for every based army you've got. Whereas if they're magnetized, you can reuse the same metal bases and then use craft bins so that you only have a couple soldiers that are touching, but you can collapse a large army into a small space.
Yeah.
Then and it's simple and it's cheap. Again, you take some simple metal squares that you get at your game store, spray paint them green on one side, spray paint them on the other side. Then you've got your summer and you've got your winter base.
Yeah.
I do the same thing with my this is old school, but hills out of ceiling tile. Same thing. You break the hills around and use them as terraced, and you keep them separate. One side's green, one side's white. So you've got hills, and you can combine them in different ways, and you've got hills for summer and hills for winter.
Yeah,
Anyways.
there's and then especially for the wargaming, the hobby as it gets more expensive, and we talk about the cost of lead has gone up incredibly, right? Plastic is right behind it. And when we look at the Evil Empire of GW still being like, what, $60 for 4 models, it's
Yeah.
like, Pitt History Guy is giving you guys the resources, especially if you're talking about expanding or knowing in your own area, or if you're just interested, if your history is a passion of yours and wargaming and they align, like this is a great resource to teach or play even different periods. Maybe you don't want to get into a period and you're like, I'm going to print off the paper models, I'm going to try this rule set out, I'm going to figure out what I'd like my army to be when I do one day paint it. I just think there's a million different reasons for these resources to be used, and it's just awesome.
And
Go
one
ahead.
last, if you want to go from free to almost free, to go back to the beginning of our conversation about 172nd cheap plastics, PlasticSoldierReview.com is an amazing resource, and they review every 172nd group of soldiers ever made, and not just see pictures of them, but and then they'll have like a whole page article, which of the figures are realistic and which aren't, and it's broken down by manufacturer. And then the page is here's by war, here's the World War One, here's all the German guys, and who's in production, who's out of production. But it's a great resource. You don't have to go randomly buy kits and this is crap. But if you want to go from free to cheap, Plastic Soldier Review is a great resource.
Awesome. No, great things, great talks with that. Again, like we said, we're going to leave. I know I put it here in our outline, but we're going to leave the talking about creating gaming communities for next time, because I think that it's going to be owed its own amount of time. And I think, we were talking about getting some of the people that you've Sherpa'd on for that call. So I think that'll be great. We're going to switch to kit bag. We're in our final 2 little segments here in our kit bag. Me and Windhurst are always basically 30 minutes before we get on air. Or no, I'm kidding. It's normally the least
5 minutes, 10 minutes.
It might be lower than that, but we talk about what we talk with the person that we're going to be a guest with, and like, hey, what's something that's brought to the hobby? What are you what's in your kit bag? What's in your little haversack besides hardtack and bullets that helps you in the hobby? And we've talked Ospreys before, and I really like Ospreys. But when I was talking to Pitt History Guy about this, there's 2 resources that he just said were amazing, and we want to really push AWI as we get into the spring here in the summer and the 250th coming up. And I just think this book is amazing. And it was written when, Pitt History Guy?
In the 70s.
It was written in the 70s. It is absolutely amazing, the amount of detail, and I'm showing the viewer. The book is The Uniforms of the American Revolution, by Joe Molo and Malcolm McGregor. And the the colors in it, I'm showing it up to the viewer right now, are absolutely outstanding for what you need. And I've bought stacks of Ospreys that I've used, and they're really cool. They're pretty pictures and everything. But as you've seen on my site, guys, if you've been following me, I'm painting my British, and I'll be honest, I've used this 1970s book for most of the cuffs. And then the bad thing about the Ospreys is like I was like, okay, what are the lapels on the Marines look, or the facings on the Marines and everything? I couldn't find it. I found it in here. I found it in this 1970 book. So uniforms of the American Revolution. Me and Windhurst have we've bought a lot of resource books for those. I just and then Pitt History Guy, being the frugal wargamer that he is, he sent me a link to it. He gifted me this one personally, so much appreciated. But he sent me a link. It was like $8 on eBay. And I was like, that's a steal. That is an absolute steal. And he has the Atlas. I found it at a lot of the battlefields around here. I've bought the American Atlas. There's several of them. The one that he has that he's been quoting does an amazing job. But the one that I have is by Craig Simons. I don't know if that's the same one you have.
Yes.
I think
yes.
yeah.
This is the old man version.
And so he's holding up the one with the blue side on it, and then I have the one with Washington.
This is hardback, yes.
Yeah, and so this one, it's great, but just Pitt History Guy was showing me the tables that it has in there, the troop movements, the descriptions of troops and everything. It's great for a war gamer who is thinking about the American War of Independence. So I'll say again, a Battlefield Atlas of the American Revolution by Craig Simons. It's amazing. The cartography that he's got in there is great. And then, as much as I love the Ospreys, I'm going to keep buying them because for whatever reason, I'm loyal. And I just remember reading them and just getting ideas before the internet was really thriving with all these resource materials. But I'm telling you, right now, I have asked, and we're going to do an episode about artificial intelligence in the future, but I have asked AI, I've like, find me the lapels of this British unit or this, and it was like, okay, and it gave me pictures of different times, and it's AI is trying to always help me out and say that I'm right, and it's not. And I go to this 1970s book, and it's right there. So,
and if it's not in the picture, it's in the text. If you go in the back,
correct.
Because it's not just a cute little Osprey. Osprey gives these cute little like one paragraph.
Yeah.
The ones in the back are like very long, much longer.
Collars. It explains stuff. It explains why they had it. It explains equipment. I just think this thing for $8 on eBay, and you war game the AWI, you need to pick it up. But those are my two plugs for it. And it comes from Pitt History Guy. Any other thoughts on those books, Pitt History Guy?
Other than, like I said, one more plug for, and I'm sure you'll provide the website to it later, which is Bruce McFarlane's series, and it's like I said, it's just for like $15, and it gets you everything. So I mean, is it the best? No, but it's $15 for rules and scenarios and the background and the basic painting guide, and you're off to the races.
It's hard to beat.
And if you want to be really geeky, what's really cool is that the PDFs are converted Word files, and so if you can't republish, but if you want to redline your own and make your own choices, I've gone back and then used Acrobat and
house rolled something, yeah,
and went back to Word and redline so I can redline my own but to the point. But there's always house rules. It doesn't matter, even the best, you guys talk all the time on your podcast. Doesn't matter how, the biggest, shiny $60 rules, still, you want to tweak something. So, and it's great if you can have that PDF and you can tweak, and so it's not like hand done, but your rules, your electronic rules, then have your...
It's that intersection of the researcher, the gamer, war gamer, or like the painter and the aesthetic person. And I just find it funny that I find some of the most people that are steeped in history, like yourself, like this is a battlefield historian we're talking to about Antietam. This is a guy that volunteers in a museum once a month. Hey, don't forget about fun, and it seems to be like a primary thing in what you do. And you might find the hermit wargamer who's like, I have to know every detail. Are those brass buttons? Are those? And I get it. We all come from a different hobby, but again, if you're keeping it social, you've got to have that give and take. And I think fun and playability is where that's at.
And if you're getting feedback, some of it's it's good. Like, this could be better and you can learn from it. But other people are just criticizing because, again, of a lack of, and you can't help that. And understand when someone's just being mean and arrogant, it's not about you. So don't take it personally, And you've got to take care of the 95% and don't get wrapped around the axle. Don't. And I know friends who take it personally every time they get a negative comment on the internet, even though it has nothing to do with them.
Words of wisdom. I'm going to kick it to Windhurst for our last section of the podcast episode.
Yep. So the scouting report. This is just looking ahead. What's on the horizon as far as what's on our hobby desks, what kind of games we've got planned, and things like that. So for me personally, working on mostly my Ancients project and World War II stuff for the Escalation League, and trying to catch up with Kentuckian on my Ancient Greek Syracuse so that we can eventually get a game in when he gets out a little bit closer. But also looking ahead for the 250th anniversary, working on some AWI stuff for a project that we'll probably talk about, do an episode on the battle. But that's what's on the paint desk right now. And then looking ahead in games, the group I'm gaming with is really getting pumped into historicals. And it sounds like a group of them want to do Baron's War, and I've already got models in for it, so it might be an excuse for me to finally get them painted. There's nothing like a game to motivate you. Scheduled.
How long have you had those models? That's the real
when
year.
Did the game come out? When did the game come out? It was within the year the first edition of the game came out, which I haven't played yet, and now they're already on second edition. So I've got second edition rules in the mail.
A Wargamer story told right here.
But that's it for me, scouting report. Paul, you want to get us, and then Kentuckian, you can finish off. Oh, before I hand it off, I thought about this earlier, and I have to do it because it matters to my mom. But you're joking about Paul Revere and the other two guys no one can remember. Jack Jewett was one of the other ones.
William Dawes, ancestor of Rufus Dawes, 6th Wisconsin. Got to put that plug in.
And Jack Jewett, whose house after the war is less than a mile from where I grew up.
Oh, wow.
In Woodford County, Kentucky. And so I grew up knowing that. My mom's worked there, volunteered on the historical committee. And so it's like, if I don't mention that after your joke and she hears this episode, I'm going to get scolded. So, Paul, hand it off to you for your scouting report.
So for Minor Wars in May, we're going to be playing What a Tanker, which was always but we haven't played it in a number of months. So for Minor Wars May, I'm going to run a Korean War What a Tanker, and we're only going to play Korean War, which will be a new take on the old game. So it'll be, Easy 8 Shermans, and again to the point, I've got a Centurion model and I've got an M26 model that are in my pile of shame. That this is my. But only two models, so it's 3 weeks. So I got that's enough time to put.
That's enough time. That's enough time.
And everything else is done. So, but T-30-45s and Su-76, but everything that you would have seen in the Korean War, but at What a Tanker playing. And if you've never played What a Tanker, it's a really great gateway drug for people who are used to playing World of Tanks online.
Yep, it's a fun game. I really like. We reviewed Chain of Command on here before. It's a narrative game. What a Tinker to me is like a slapstick fun, to be honest, especially with you rolling the dice, and it keeps people engaged. So I do enjoy that game. I like Octoon Panzer a lot as well. Me and Windhurst had played through that one. No, that's awesome. So 2 tanks in 3 weeks. That's probably the least amount, of work you've assigned yourself. So that's pretty cool. The hobby desk for me is I'm an idiot. And I was painting Pyrrhic Army and a Fallschirmjäger Army, and now it's AWI, British, and Militia, and lots of them for a battle that we're going to do that may link to your Lexington and Concord. So we'll see how that goes.
And 32 feet long?
Yeah, no, nowhere close. This is going to be a 6x4, and I might try to
32 inches, maybe.
Yeah.
Man.
But
I'm gonna be complaining so much.
This is the most inaccurate thing.
I'm gonna be flaming you on whenever I be back.
No, but we talk about especially with you and your gaming. We talk about how we always get projects, and we try to be disciplined. Me and Windhurst, one of our goals is to be disciplined and we be militant in our diligent in our work. And I love posting that George Costanza photo because like I'm king of the idiots. When I was my Caesarians, my Fallschirmjäger, and my Pyrrhic, I had a good line on, and then AWI, I was like, I'm not doing anything for the 250th. I need to, and I ordered like 2,000 plastic epic Revolutionary War miniatures, and I'm a moron.
And then strong-armed me into it.
Yeah. I basically was like, hey, Windhurst, I'll have a bunch of these sprues I can give you. Like, you need to paint these, and this is after I make him paint Age of Hannibal. I like try to be like, hey, if you could paint this 6 mil ancients, what could be wrong?
That's my joke is Kentucky is very persuasive when he wants me to do something. He just sends me the stuff and says, "You have no excuse now. Paint it."
Yeah, paint
this.
Like,
all right, I guess I'm doing it.
So we're the militant discipline that we've had for these last few years leading up to this podcast and everything is like in shambles right now in the last 90 days. It's all over the floor. We're the militia. Like we're breaking. We're doing everything. But no, a lot of good stuff. Hopefully with that in the hobby. The bad thing about the military that we'll tell the viewers and audiences right now is, besides, watch the news, we move every once or 2 years. It's great because we get to meet amazing people. We get to meet hobby groups all over the United States and outside. But again, my move is coming up here in the next 90 days. So there will be a time where I'll have to button down the hobby projects, pack up, my room, my man cave here, and move out, headed to Kansas in the next year, but only for a year. So it'll be interesting, but we'll probably look for that gap in the summer of an episode. We always take a gap episode once a year and only push out 11, so that will probably happen in the summer. So just stay tuned. We have a lot of new episodes and things coming, and you'll see by our painting projects, but I just wanted to put that pitch in here because my projects are probably going to recoil, and there's going to be some like decisions made where it's like, okay, unpainted armies are going back in a box, and I may get to them at the next duty station. But that's all that I have. I want to at least first say this. I'll go Pitt History Guy, you go, and then Windhurst will close us off. I can't thank you enough, Paul, for being here, for taking this interview with us, for walking us through a 32-foot Lexington and Concord scenario, your passion, your drive into the research to get that to the tabletop, to make it playable, to make it fun, to just, I can't imagine the smiling faces, the cackles, and the shenanigans that have happened around that table in the times you've hosted it. So I look forward to all the things that you're going to do, and we look forward to staying in contact with you and talking about growing communities in the future with you. Hats off to you. You're a gold standard of the hobby, and look forward to trying to emulate you and some of the things me and Windhurst are doing. So truly cannot thank you enough for being here and taking the time out of your day to be. And I know you've been traveling a lot, so truly appreciate it. Thanks so much, brother. And a fellow, nobody may know this on it, but Paul is a fellow Kentuckian. All three people on this panel are from Kentucky. And so for you people in London or England or in the EU that are
not
like
London, Kentucky.
Yeah, not London, Kentucky. But you're like, I couldn't understand a word any of those three gentlemen were saying. If our twangs came out anywhere in this time, that was probably the reason. But thanks again, Paul. I'll kick it to you and then to Windhurst to close us off.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's exactly one thing. Great to be a part of an all Kentucky expat podcast, but with 3 different services represented, with Army and Air Force, and I'm 3rd generation Navy, although I was only civil service 15 years. So
awesome.
But anyway, thank you, and keep going.
Yeah, great, Paul. I always feel like I say this at the end of every one of our interview episodes, that the greatest personal joy from getting to do this podcast is having the opportunity to talk to like-minded individuals who are so passionate about the hobby. And like at the end of all of them, I feel like, oh man, I just talked to a kindred soul. Like now I want to go game with this person, and you're right up there. I'm really looking forward to picking your brain in the future about the work you do in community building. Even just the tidbit we got here, like Kentucky said, I really think that's worth its own episode. It's something as I near retirement from active duty that I really want to be able to get into when I settle back down at home. And so I'm going to probably, as I get closer, be picking your brain for guidance and stuff like that. So I'm really grateful to have made your acquaintance and appreciate your time coming on and talking with us. So if that's it, as we always like to say, grab your spear, your shield, your musket, or your belt-fed machine gun and join us on the next On Patrol. Dismissed.